Anastasia Bale got out of the carriage and ordered the poor man to show her the way. He replied that he had worked like a dog to track her down. The man was very curious and asked why she needed it. The guy put the sword on his shoulder and ordered him to keep his mouth shut and show the way. "There she is!" The poor man pointed to a little girl who was playing with a piece of wood and a peg, sitting on the ground near the house in the rain. "The lady can't even imagine how much effort it took me to track her down. The one who calls herself her mother is guarding her well," the poor man cried. They threw a bag at his feet. There was a lot of gold in it, and the man was happy about it. For this, he had to take all the information with him to the grave. The girl was very beautiful, with golden curly hair, a beautiful camellia, a flower in the mud, a gem born in a brothel. Anastasia approached her and asked the girl what she was doing there, all alone in the rain. The girl replied that her mother was busy at the moment. This brought a smile to the woman's face. She asked the girl, "You must be Leah, right?" The girl was surprised that the woman knew her name. Then Anastasia told her a story. One day, a pregnant girl of incredible beauty came here in search of shelter. With no roof over her head, she knocked on every door, begging for a piece of bread. She slept among criminals and homeless people, and was always afraid that she was being persecuted. A few months later, she gave birth to a baby right on the street. Unlike all the rottenness of the slums, an angel with emerald eyes and golden hair. When winter came, the child fell ill from the unforgiving cold, and without a penny. For the first time in her life, his mother sold her body to the town doctor. And so, 12 years later, Anastasia told the girl that her mother was terminally ill. The little girl was very scared and ran to the house. Anastasia's servant grabbed her and picked her up. She was too light for a 12-year-old girl. He told the lady about it, and Anastasia replied that now was not the time for talking, and she ordered him to take people and clean up here. The guy asked, "So what about her mother?" And the lady answered, "What do you think? What happens to fire in the rain?" And she really hoped that the girl's mother would not survive. And they left, taking Leah. What a nice smell. So soft. "Am I in heaven?" the little girl thought, and suddenly she jumped up on the bed, opening her eyes. She was in a luxurious room on a huge soft bed. The girl was frightened when she saw the maid. She asked her if they were in heaven. The girl smiled and said that she must be very hungry. The food on the tray looked very appetizing, but the girl did not eat. She was very worried about her mother. She asked the maid what was wrong with her mother. The girl said that the beautiful aunt told her that her mother was sick, and she wanted to know what was wrong with her. She also didn't know where they were now. The maid thought that the girl was not hungry, since she was not eating. But this was not so. She was just very worried about her mother. And then she asked where that beautiful aunt was. The girl replied that the mistress would arrive as soon as the girl had eaten and bathed. Leah did not understand why she needed to bathe. But, in fact, a terrible stench emanated from her. Suddenly, the door to the room opened and a fair-haired boy ran in. He scolded the maid for not calling him as soon as Leah woke up. The boy greeted Camellia and sat down next to her on the bed. He introduced himself as Kieran Bale. Leah cringed in fear. Kieran asked her not to be afraid of him, because he was turning 15 this year and was only 3 years older than her. Leah curled up into a ball and continued to shake. She asked to let her go to her mother, because she hadn't even warned her and she would be very worried. The boy understood her sadness. "You must miss her a lot," he asked Leah. Then, Kieran asked the maid Betty where Leah's mother was. Betty sighed sadly, but she said that the mistress would tell them about it, and her task was only to feed and bathe Leah. Then the girl remembered that she needed to take a bath. She felt embarrassed to be so dirty in front of Kieran. He was so beautiful and clean, and Betty then offered her something to eat after the bath. She was very kind to the girl, and Betty promised to help her with everything when Leah said that she didn't know how to wash herself. Suddenly, Kieran coughed and stained Leah's bed with blood. The girl was scared, and Betty screamed for a doctor. Leah asked her if he was going to die. Betty didn't expect that question, but she said he'd be fine. He'd probably just been out in the rain a lot. And they went to the bathroom. After bathing and changing, the girl and Betty approached the mistress's room. Entering, Leah greeted her and thanked her for the food. The lady noted that the girl looked much better after she had tidied herself up. But Leah still asked to go to her mother. Then Mrs. Anastasia asked her to come to her. When Leah sat down next to her, the lady said that the girl would not be able to see her mother anymore. After all, she committed a crime and stole something very dear and very important to her, which could never be returned. The girl did not believe it, and tears flowed from her eyes. Leah said she would find the item, maybe it was just lost. After all, her mother was not a thief. Then Anastasia called Betty. The maid brought her a box with scissors. The mistress said that from now on, Leah was Camillus Bale, and she cut off her beautiful hair. When Leah objected, Anastasia said, "If you swear to live like Camillus from today on, I promise that nothing will happen to you and your mother." As Leah sat on her bed crying, Betty said that her mother would not be punished. She would just undergo treatment, and the lady was not as evil as she might have thought. But the girl must learn to obey. After all, this is the only way to save Laura. Leah turned around sharply and asked if Betty knew her mother. The maid replied that, of course she knew. "After all, this is your father's house," said Betty, and showed Leah his portrait on the wall. They were very similar, hair, eyes, and she remembered her mother's words, standing in front of the mirror. "Camelia, from your father, you got your beautiful honey-colored hair and mesmerizing emerald eyes. You're his gubby," Mom always said. Leah looked at her reflection in the glass cabinet and had only one question in her head. "Mom, what's going on?" The maids were working near the palace. They were discussing the child who had arrived with the mistress. They said he was the illegitimate son of the Marquis. But why would the mistress bring him into the house? After all, she already has a son, Lord Kieran. But, secretly, Lord Kieran is ill, and if the aristocrats find out about this, they will turn against the Bale house. She lets them know that even if something happens to Kieran, House Bale will still be just as powerful in the hands of another successor. When the maids saw Camillus with Betty on the street, everyone noticed his complete resemblance to Kieran. But only they had a question: was it a boy? Leah complained to Betty that she couldn't remember the way in such a huge palace area, calling it a meme. But Betty scolded him for this address. She is just a servant to him. And now he is Bale, son of Marquis Gillard, and must learn to behave like an aristocrat. His lessons will take place in Lord Kieran's room. Then Leah asked Betty if she thought the mistress would let her go home to her mother if she did everything as she was told. Betty replied that the mistress was a woman of her word, and the Marquis will be back soon. He's finished with the work in the north, and he's already looking forward to seeing him, Camillus Bale. Leah was also interested. This place was very different from the slums. It was very beautiful here. But the beautiful silence was broken by gunshots, and Leah noticed a handsome guy with dark hair. "Leos! You finally came out of the room. You have no idea how worried I was." Kieran suddenly shouted and rushed to hug his new brother. Kieran introduced Laius as his little brother to the tall guy, Claude. Claude motioned for Laius to cover his ears and shoot into the sky at the birds. The delicate scent of lavender was overpowered by the sharp smell of gunpowder. "This place is full of beautiful but deadly things," Leah thought. "I see you're not at all bothered by your brother's sudden appearance," Claude asked Kieran, who was playing with a real gun in the room. When the boy asked if he should be concerned, Claude replied that his brother was proof of his father's deception. Kieran responded that deception had its price, and his brother, Leos, had already sacrificed a lot for it. All in all, he was glad that he now had a younger brother, and Claude had nothing to worry about. Two brothers, they were so similar, but at heart they were completely different. And yet they looked like two peas in a pod, thought Claude, watching Leos playing in the yard from the window of the room. During lunch, Kieran told his brother that he should eat more because he had lost a lot of weight. He was genuinely worried about him. Ms. Anastasia asked Laius how his classes were going. If he studied well, he would be the best in the academy, like his brother Kieran. Kieran told his mother that it had only been a week since classes had started, and Leos was trying very hard. And he hadn't slept much in the last few days because of Mr. Claude's constant shooting. When Mistress Anastasia went to her room, Kieran told her about Claude. They met at the academy. Claude is the heir of the Ihar house, the guardians of the north. Even though they are the same age and study together at the academy, he shows himself in many ways. Leah thought he was so fascinating, but at the same time scary. Kieran suggested going hunting with them next time. Laius said he had never even held a teddy bear. Brother, you have to start somewhere. Leah thought that her brother was too cute. Suddenly, the door opened. A maid ran in and said that the Marquis had returned. Kieran was very happy about this. The Marquis stepped out of the carriage and embraced his wife. The boys came out to meet him. Kieran embraced his father. And Leah thought, this must be her father. He called the boy to him, looked into his eyes, hugged him tightly, and said, "Welcome home, Camillus." "I heard it was a girl." "We don't need a girl. Do you think a girl can behave like a boy?" The Marquis asked his wife. She told him it was not forever, only until Kieran recovered, and asked him to think of her as a means of maintaining the reputation of the house. The guy said it was heartless of her to make the girl suffer for the sake of their reputation. Anastasia replied that he was the heartless one. After all, it was he who shared a bed with the maid. She then thought that it was a temporary infatuation that would quickly become boring. But then, with Kieran's first steps, her belly also began to grow. The entire house and all the servants followed her orders, in case she gave birth to a boy. The day Kieran fell, it was as if the sky had collapsed. The Marquis kicked the girl out of the palace, and since then, their son has suffered. Anastasia will never be able to forget about it. The Marquis asked what had happened to Leah's mother. Anastasia replied that she was probably dead or crazy. Her husband said that she was overworking herself. Kieran may be weak, but no one would dare look down on the house of Baal. Anastasia replied that he was her son, and she would not stand by and watch. Anastasia said that the woman responsible for Kieran's condition haunts her dreams from time to time. It's hard to bear, and his wife asked him not to forget what she had done. Gilead swore by the house of Baal that he would never forgive her. When Anastasia's friends gathered with girls of Leah's age, they were all in love with Claude. One of them noticed that he was looking at someone. The girls asked Anastasia who it was, catching Snow with his mouth on the street, and she told the maid to take Laius to his chambers. Since the street was still too dangerous for him, her friends realized that this was the lady's son who was being treated in isolation. And one of the girls asked the lady, "Is he really a boy?" Anastasia flinched at the unexpected question, but the girl said that he was just so handsome that everyone probably mistook him for a girl. "Brother, I have to go to class," Laius shouted, breaking free. "You're wrong, Master Theodore is coming tomorrow morning," Kieran answered. "And now, Mr. Claude will teach you how to shoot," Kieran said, pulling him by the arm. Claude was already standing, aiming his gun. Claude noticed Laius and asked him why he had tasted the snow. Laius replied that he was just curious. Then Claude gave him the gun and helped him aim. Suddenly, after the shot, the servants shouted that Monsieur Claude was wounded and that they needed to call a doctor. The boy replied that everything was fine. He had just burned his hand on the barrel of the gun. Leo started crying because Claude got burned. The boy was surprised by such a reaction. Then, he asked the boy why he was crying, because it wasn't him that was hurt. And Leus just silently rolled a snowball and put it on his burnt hand. Tears ran down his cheeks, and the snow melted and flowed off Claude's hand. The thoughts in the little boy's head were that he had wounded a nobleman. What would he do to him for this? Hit him, beat him, or perhaps execute him? And what would Mrs. Anastasia say? He asked for forgiveness and mentally asked his mother to help. The girl ran up and, pushing Laius away, offered her help to Claude and gave him a handkerchief. The girl yelled at the boy for hurting Mr. Claude and how dangerous it was. Kieran stood up for his brother because she raised her voice. Kieran suggested that Leus ask Mr. Claude for forgiveness. When he did, Claude threw the handkerchief into the snow and asked him to do it again. Leus didn't understand whether he needed to apologize again, and Claude smiled and told him to apply the snow again, because it helps much more than a handkerchief. Mrs. Anastasia hit Laius on the cheek so hard that he fell to the floor. She screamed that he had forgotten his role, just to exist, and not to suck up to the prince and Mr. Claude, thinking that if they like you, you can be whoever you want. "If you involve Kieran in something like this again, I will not be so merciful. Your task is simply to live," the lady finished. "What a show," thought Claude as he passed the room in the corridor. He stood there for a moment, lost in thought, and then walked away. Leos was sitting outside, in the snow, under the starry sky, crying, remembering his mother. Suddenly, Claude came up to him, rolled a snowball and put it on his tears. When Leos asked what he was doing, Claude replied, "So that's what it's like?" shook the snow off his hands, and walked away. The kid sat there, not understanding what it was. "If you want to raise her as a boy, you must respect her, Anastasia," the Marquis told his wife. He shamed her for hitting their child. Anastasia said she wouldn't have to punish him if he hadn't made mistakes, and she would have done the same to Kieran if he had brought shame on their name. Gilliard asked if Leos had brought shame on their name. She replied that weakness breeds weakness when mistakes are allowed to go unpunished, and someone else was bringing shame on their family. With these words, the Marquis slammed the door. Walking down the corridor, he asked a servant how the search for Leah's mother was going. He was told that she had left lower. Some say she is obsessed with finding her daughter, while others say she is simply broke. The Marquis replied that there is no point in reporting the gossip, and he told the servant that, it turns out, they had found a diamond mine in the neutral territory of the north. And if it weren't for the Emperor's intervention, the land would already belong to Duke Ihara. The servant replied that in that case, war would begin. Gilliard continued that conspirators were already gathering around Gayor. Levine Sergio is the king of Gayor. If they help him in Delcasa, then he will be in their debt. Their conversation is interrupted by the news that Kieran is in trouble. The mother cried over her sick son's bed. Gilliard asked the doctor to report the situation. He said that the treatment was not producing any results. Anastasia screamed for another cure, and the doctor replied that the best doctors of the empire were working on the treatment, and the boy's lungs were gradually failing. Claude suggested sending him to the neutral territory of the north, to Gayor. There is a doctor there. His last name is Schmidt. He is called an all-powerful healer. Gilliard said that Gayor bordered Delcasa to the south, and he could go north with Kieran in search of Schmidt. And Claude said that Schmidt was the court physician of Sergio's house. And besides, he owed his father. And Claude also felt very sorry for Kieran. When Claude left Kieran's room, he noticed Leah standing in the hallway. The boy thought it was very strange that he couldn't visit his brother without permission. Leos bowed when he saw Claude. He walked past, stopped, and asked how old he was. Leos wondered why he needed to know, but he replied that he was 12. Claude asked him if he went to the academy, and he replied that he had private lessons. Claude then said that they would meet in 4 years at the academy. 4 years later, Leah was beautiful, but she was still Leas. Her chest was bandaged. She was 16. Betty reminded Leah that it was time for her to get a haircut. Her hair had grown longer during her mistress's absence, and when her mistress returned, she would punish everyone for it. All the servants of the castle paid attention to Leah. Betty said that they were just jealous of her beauty. Leah also wondered how Kieran was doing. It had been 4 winters since Kieran had gone north to seek treatment. The king of Gayor had offered to train him in the north for the duration of his treatment. Gilliard was furious. He couldn't accept that his son was being held hostage, and Anastasia was ruthless and forbade Leah to communicate with her brother and Claude. Leah was satisfied that Kieran would recover before his return, and she would be able to return to her mother again. The servant informed Leas that someone from the academy had come to see him. The guests asked Gilliard to send his youngest son to the academy. He replied that his wife, who was currently away, was in charge of the children's education. The man informed the Marquis that House Ilhar hoped to see Camillus at the academy as soon as possible. "Claude wants to see me," Camillus thought. The father replied that he would then need a room and a servant. The professor replied that they would provide him with a room, and that having a servant was against the rules of the academy. Master Theodore said that Leos had already surpassed his graduates. This was another reason to nurture this talent in the academy. When Leos heard the professor's words about his father being allowed to visit him in the capital, he began to beg his father to let him go to the academy. The boy promised to study well and not to disgrace the Bale House. Then, the father agreed and promised to discuss with Anastasia his education and housing near the academy. Leah ran along the road, thinking that her mother was somewhere in the capital and that she would soon be able to find her. I wonder if she missed her. Had she forgotten about her daughter? She certainly never thought that her daughter would become part of the Bale household. Mom always smiled when they were together, and they never had secrets from each other. It was good with her mother. She could talk about everything, and there was no need to hide. Leah decided that the academy in the capital was her chance to return to her previous life. Suddenly, Camillus was called by a man. He was from the academy. He hinted that Leos was not the right gender, in fact, and warned that people might not be so kind to people like him. Pipi, Leah's maid, was very worried that Leos would leave for the capital without her. He reassured her that his parents would definitely not let him go without her. Pippi was happy. Leos suggested that Pippi choose an outfit for him in the capital. She was happy, as she had long dreamed of this. And Leah herself thought only about finding her mother in the capital. A few days later, Leos saw the imperial capital of Ether from the carriage window. His father asked him if it was true that he had never been outside lower. He replied that his mother had said it was too dangerous. She was right. The capital was not known for its safety, but his father had said that with the right company, it was full of delights. Gilliard told Leos that the imperial tailor worked in this building, and he was asked to work on his uniform. They were about to enter when suddenly the prince, Wade von Wise, called out to them. He embraced Leos and said that his father could hardly wait to see him. Leos was very surprised by this, but told his father that everything was fine, and the prince would see him off. Wade joked that 4 years had passed and he was still as thin. The last time they saw each other, Claude got burned by a gun because of him. Wade told him that at the academy, everyone was talking about Leos, and he was famous now. Then Leos wondered what exactly they were saying about him, and Wade replied that the younger Bale, who had never been seen in public, had finally appeared in the capital. In any case, Leos was a beautiful child, in the prince's opinion. But now, to his surprise, he had become very feminine. When they entered the tailor's room, he had a client and said that he was busy now, since His Majesty had not made an appointment. Wade sat down on the sofa. He said he had merely brought him a lost customer. Then he turned to Leos to see who was at the tailor's. It was Claude. While buttoning his shirt, he told Leos that he hadn't changed at all. And looking into his eyes, he whispered, "Hello, Camillus." When the tailor took Leos's measurements, Claude was still sitting on the sofa. The tailor asked Leos to undress so that the measurements would be more accurate. Leah asked for a screen. And when she took off her clothes, the tailor realized that she was a girl. He offered her another shirt that would hide everything that was needed. When Camillus came out from behind the screen, the prince immediately invited him to visit him. Leah had only one question in her head. When will this all end? Claude and Wade mounted their horses. Leah sat with Claude, and the prince did not like it. Claude said it was for his safety because the prince was a bad rider. Leos saw the imperial palace for the first time, and when he was invited to the imperial banquet, he said that this place was too beautiful for him. Claude responded that Mr. Leos was a flatterer, and that His Majesty was too trusting. This offended Leos greatly, and Wade replied that it was great. After all, he loved people who admired him. Then, Claude blocked the prince's path and asked him to control himself. Claude reminded him that this had happened before with the Earl of Sheringham's son and what had happened. Then Wade asked him if he thought he had seduced the younger Sheringham. To this, Claude replied that it was better to be careful so that there were no misunderstandings. And besides, the fact that Camillus was too beautiful for his own good. Wade asked Camillus not to take it personally, as Claude was only trying to hurt him. And Leos told Claude that he was not a flatterer, and he simply always tries to be reasonable, no matter where he is and with whom, and without having any benefit from it. And having thanked Mr. Claude, Leos ran off to the palace. The next day, while having breakfast in the same company, the prince asked Leos if he had a bride in mind to marry. To this, he replied that his brother must marry first, and the prince said that Kieran would marry his sister. Leos was sad that he would not be invited to his brother's wedding. Claude told Wade that it was simply because Madame Anastasia had not returned yet, and that was why he did not know about his brother's wedding. Leos was grateful for his support, and looking into Leos's eyes, Claude said, "I look forward to the day when we will be close, Camillus Bale. I look forward to it." When Camillus left, Claude asked the prince about him. Claude hinted that he seemed to like Leos, to which Wade replied that it didn't matter if they were men or women, as long as they were beautiful, he would have them. That's why he liked Claude and Kieran. Wade said that Leos could be Kieran's replacement in society, but in the end, he would still be his property. While the friends were walking to the banquet, the prince said that he had already refused many girls, and it seemed that His Majesty was seriously aiming to find him a wife. Claude asked, what about the Marquis of Shelby's daughter? But Wade was indignant that she was destined for Claude. and everyone knew about their engagement. Claude was upset, remembering the engagement. Leos had a stomachache and was allowed to skip the banquet and stay home. Then Leah took off her uncomfortable clothes and remained in a shirt. She took a jar of candies and sat on the window to watch the starry sky and breathe in the fresh air. Leah thought that her mother was somewhere out there, beyond the castle walls. She really wanted to see her and was wondering if her mother would recognize her. But suddenly, she heard a conversation. The voices were very familiar to her. "I heard that Princess Rosina and Master Kieran are to be engaged next month. Should we be next, do you think?" It was Marilyn Shelby's voice. Claude told her that her father would benefit more if she got engaged to someone who was really ready for marriage. The girl asked if he was joking. To this, the guy replied that there were enough good men in the empire, and most of them were ready to kill just for one look at her. But Marilyn replied that none of them could compare to him. She thanked him for his company and, saying that she would look forward to her next dance with him, left. Watching this, Leos felt awkward and wanted to hide and close the window. But the candies spilled out of the jar and fell right on Claude. Leos got scared and closed the window. He thought that Claude wouldn't look for his room and come in. He felt bad about what he heard, but it was an accident, and he dropped some candy on him. Claude entered Leos's room and asked him if he really thought he wouldn't find him. Claude asked why he was eating too many sweets if his stomach hurt. Leo said he needed to eat something sweet to get over the taste of the medicine. Then Claude asked him to come and sit next to him on the couch. Leah didn't want to approach because she was afraid that he had noticed something. Claude insisted that he come over and say that he wanted to check something. All he wanted to say was that you had to be careful with Prince Wade. The prince is a connoisseur of beauty, and he doesn't care who's in front of him. Men, women, nobles, or peasants. These words mean nothing to him. "Don't smile too much around him and keep your distance," Claude told Leos. "Your voice is too charming. It could further arouse the prince's interest," Claude continued. To which Leos asked if he was jealous. Leah herself did not realize how she asked. "If the prince likes everything beautiful, then why don't you worry about yourself, Monsieur Claude?" "And why?" asked Claude. "Because you are the most beautiful person I have ever seen," said Leah, and quickly ran away, saying that she was just about to take a shower. Claude sat thoughtfully and then asked, "You've made me your little plaything, haven't you?" Finding Leah's shirt, he inhaled the scent of lavender. Snow in spring. In 4 years, Kieran had never gotten used to it. His friend, Ian Sergio, the third prince of Gayor, was sitting in the room with him. Kieran wrote a letter and asked Ian to deliver it. The prince wondered why the boy didn't ask his mother to deliver it to Leah, since that's where she was heading. The guy replied that he had already sent letters to Leah many times, but had never received any answers. Ian realized that Mrs. Anastasia did not want him and his sister to communicate. Then the prince remembered how Kieran often bragged about his sister, who was as beautiful as an angel. So, he agreed to deliver the letter to her personally. Kieran wanted to warn him that things weren't so simple with Leah, but Ian ran away too quickly, and his mother came into his room. She realized that he had a prince. Ms. Anastasia said that it was of course good that she and the prince had become friends, but one should not forget that Ian was from an enemy family, and one should not get too close to him. Then Kieran decided to go to the library. The lady was offended that lately he was increasingly avoiding her. The guy replied that he was simply looking forward to returning home. A few days later, at the palace, Leos and Pippi asked Betty for permission to go into town. She warned them that in the streets of Eater, attacks on women, especially noble women, had become more frequent. And although Leos is a guy, at first glance, he can still be mistaken for a girl. But Leos and Pippi did not listen to her, but were already running to the carriage. The girl's mother begged Prince Wade to punish the criminal who attacked Marilyn. He said that the emperor had personally instructed the Imperial Guard to hunt down the criminal. When Wade and Claude went outside, they discussed how the criminal really only attacks noble women. There are clues that he is part of a revolutionary faction that wants to end the empire, which means he will be apprehended quickly. Claude told Wade that his job was to keep Marilyn company. The prince was again indignant that she was not his beloved. Then Claude said goodbye and left. Driving through the city, Claude noticed Leos and remembered how he had spilled candy on him, and Leah also noticed him, freezing in place. Pippi was happy to be here in the shop with Laius. She thought they had come for the pen that the gentleman liked. But Leah surprised her by saying that she needed a dress. Pippi promised to pick out the best dress for the beautiful Leah. Leah decided to buy 5 dresses. While Leah, still pretending to be Laius, was looking at the hats, someone called her Camellia. She saw a guy in a white uniform and told him he was mistaken. But he was sure that this was Kieran Bale's sister. Laius insisted that he was mistaken. But the boy was struck by their resemblance. Then Laius asked who he was, and the guy replied that he was her friend and wanted to join her for a portion of a luxurious fruit sorbet. Laius agreed. When they were sitting in the cafe, the prince felt stuffy and wanted to sit on the terrace. But Laius objected, as his clothes with the Gayor banner were too conspicuous. Ian replied that his clothes were conspicuous, but not as much as pretending to be a man. Laius was indignant that he was indeed a man, and Laius asked how his brother was doing and how he was feeling. Ian replied that he was fine, but had been waiting for news from his sister for a long time. As it turned out, his relative had not responded to any of the letters. Laius was surprised, because he had never received letters from his brother. Ian said that he knew that they had not been delivered, but Kieran wrote to his dear sister every month, but he never got any answers from her. That's why he asked for help. "The only way to make me go is to stop pretending, Camellia," said the prince. But Laius insisted that his name was Camillus. Then Ian said that Kieran would soon return to Corsair, and he would be able to return the long-awaited answer to him personally. And he gave him an envelope in his hands. Leah held the envelope in her hands and wondered if her brother had recovered and was returning home. What would happen to her? Would she return to Camelia's life? Mr. Ian liked Leah very much and asked permission to invite her to Gayor. He really hoped to welcome her to his home like Camellia and kissed her hand. Sitting over the reply letter, Leah was wondering where to start. She asked Betty why she had bought 5 dresses for Pippi, and she also ate dessert with a foreigner. Betty was worried, because you have to be careful with strangers, and even more so after the criminal who attacked Marilyn Shelby appeared. Leah decided to take advantage of the moment and ask how Mrs. Anastasia found her back then, 4 years ago. After all, the capital is so big, she couldn't have found her by accident. Betty replied that one of the servants had met Laura before. Leah asked who it was, and Betty said that the mistress had sent him away. Then Leah asked why it had happened to her. Betty replied that the lady had always been worried about Kieran's poor health and had been pointed at, and everyone around was discussing other possible heirs. Relatives began to pressure the lady to adopt one of their sons, but she knew that her son would not survive then, even if he recovered. After all, their plans were clear. That was what brought her to Leah. Leah confessed to Betty that Kieran would soon return and she would no longer be needed. And then she would go in search of her mother. As Leah was swimming in the pool again, fully clothed, she thought about how she wanted to get out of here so much. But at the same time, something was holding her here. Lying on her back in the water, she noticed someone's gaze on her. It was Claude. He was sitting by the pool and didn't take his eyes off her. Then Laius came out of the water and asked Claude what he was doing there. He said that he had mixed up the dates when Kieran was coming, but in reality, he knew it wasn't today. And so, Claude took off his shirt and said that he wanted to swim with Laius and that it would be their first time swimming together. Laius wanted to leave, but Claude grabbed his hand and pulled him into the water. Coming out of the water, Leah was worried that he might see something through her wet shirt, so she wrapped herself in a towel. Claude lay down on a mat of grass and invited Laius to sit next to him. Laius sat down next to him, but said he could come in if he wanted to take a nap. Claude asked him to stay. The guy asked what Laius planned to do when Kieran returned. After all, the first heir gets everything, and the rest get nothing. Laius replied that he already had some plans for the future, and Claude offered him to be a butler at the Ihar court. It was an important leadership position. Leah was surprised by this proposal, because she thought he hated her. But Laius answered him that he would do what he wanted and money was not important to him. Then Claude said not to talk nonsense and asked to wake him up in an hour, specifically him, and not the servants. Leah admired him, with his eyes closed. When Claude fell asleep, Leah stroked his hair and thought that with each passing moment, it would be more and more difficult for her to leave this place. It was already late in the evening when Leah woke up in her bed. She called Pippi and asked what she was doing there. After all, she was outside. Pippi replied that Leah had fallen asleep outside, and Mr. Claude had to carry her into the room in his arms. Pippi was very surprised by this, as was Leah herself. When Leah asked where he was, Pippi answered that he had already returned to the capital, and Pippi took Leah to bathe with new shampoos. The new shampoos smelled absolutely gorgeous. Leah asked Pippi if she was heavy. Pippi said that she was light as a feather, even lighter than she should be. Leah was worried that she had caused Mr. Claude a lot of inconvenience, and she was sure that next time he would say that she was too skinny for a man. To this, Pippi replied that she was worried about something else. After all, Leah had grown up, and now it would be increasingly difficult to convince others that she was a man. Pippi asked how long she was going to hide, since Mr. Kieran was already better. Leah yelled at her for going beyond the limits. But in fact, she thought that Pippi was right, and she remembered the words of Prince Ian, who soon wanted to see her as his guest, like Camellia. Camellia decided that if she wanted to find her mother and get her life back, she had to make sure that these two, Ian and Claude, didn't find her out. Kieran hugged Leah tightly and told her how she had grown and become a real lady. Leah also said that he had grown and changed too. Mrs. Anastasia told Laius that he had done well in their absence. She understood that the brothers wanted to catch up, but they had some things to discuss. Sitting in the room with Leah, Anastasia asked if she and her brother had been in touch for the past 4 years. Leah said no, but she believed Kieran was a caring brother. The lady said that she had heard that Laius was leaving for the capital in 2 days. Laius replied that he had been able to get a place at the academy thanks to her kindness. Anastasia replied that Mr. Theodore had spoken warmly of him, and the lady praised Camillus for his good work. She said that he was now worthy of being Kieran's brother. Anastasia asked if it was possible that Leah wanted to find her mother in the capital. Leah replied that she would find her no matter what. Anastasia said that she did not understand, since she had already entered high society, and all the nobles knew her as Camillus, and she can't just show up as a girl. Leah's job is to live in the shadows, like they agreed. Anastasia had one plan. The lady said that there was one way to find her mother, but there was no hurry and it would take some time. Therefore, he would go to the academy, and then, when everyone forgets about him, they will hold a funeral for Camillus Bale, and she will be able to return to the life of Camellia again. Leah was very surprised, and Anastasia told her that she just wanted to fulfill the promise she made to her when she brought her here. The girl played her role even better than she expected. Kieran recovered thanks to her. So, Anastasia wants to thank her in this way. And she also allowed Laius to attend Kieran's engagement. After that, he will return to Geor again. He is so thirsty for knowledge. Then Leah asked for a favor, to forgive her mother. Forgive? What an impudent request. How dare you ask for this? Anastasia asked. Impudent? If begging for forgiveness is impudent, then what were those 4 years I lived as a man for? I agreed to live like Camillus to earn my mother's forgiveness. So please forgive us, finally, Leah begged. That's enough, Mom. A funeral for a living person? Camellia is a member of the Bale House by blood. She is part of our family too. Kieran defended Leah. Anastasia laughed and told Kieran that Camillus had come to their family only for him, and now he was of little use, and unnecessary things should be thrown away. You are a disgrace to the House of Bale, Mother, said Kieran. Lady Anastasia was outraged that he dared to speak to her like that. Leah headed out of the room, and her brother called her Camellia. She replied that her name was Camillus and left the room. Camellia sat in front of the pool and cried. She couldn't understand how Mrs. Anastasia could come up with something like that. A funeral! After all, those 4 years she spent as Camillus weren't all lies, and she'll never be able to return here after she leaves for the capital. But why was she so attached to this place? Not now, Pippi. I want to be alone, Leah said to the one who approached her. I see you are still not a girl, Prince Ian told her. It is good to see you again, Camellia. Why are you crying? He continued as she turned around. Thank God, Marilyn, you've gone, Her Highness said at a banquet at the palace. Marilyn Shelby thanked her for her concern. Then, Marilyn noticed Claude and greeted him. The girl wanted to thank him for visiting her when she was unconscious. But Claude was cold and said that it was time for him to leave since they had already seen each other. Marilyn replied that the reception had not even started yet. Then the boy said that he needed to visit Kieran. Although the girl didn't like it, he apologized and took his leave. As Prince Ian and Claude rode in the car, Ian informed Claude that Kieran had returned with a guest. King Lewin's third son, the mad dog of war. The boys discussed how these savages from Gayor couldn't be trusted. If he was anything like his father, he would take whatever he wanted. The prince was surprised that Kieran would associate with someone like Ian, but Claude replied that it was Ian who had protected Kieran when he was in Gayor. Wade was angry that Claude was there too. After all, you can't communicate with the enemy. Claude replied that Kieran was also a nobleman and knew what he was doing. Still, that doesn't change the fact that Kieran is dealing with an enemy prince. But if something happens to Ian Sergio while he's here, war is inevitable. As a result of the conflict over diamond mines in neutral territory, the stability of the region has been shaken. Camillus asked Prince Ian to stop following him. He showed the prince where the banquet was taking place, but the prince said that he was there because of her, Camilla. As Leos was about to leave, he slipped and fell right into Prince Ian's arms. He called him Camellia, and she responded. Kieran called Leah and looked at Ian with indignation. He had asked the prince to wait for him in the hall, and he had come here, to Leah. Ian replied that he was bored and decided to take a walk, and when he smelled a familiar scent, his feet led him to Camellia. Kieran grimaced at Ian, following the scent like a dog. He said it was time for him to return to the hall. He asked Leah if they had met the prince before. Leah replied that they were just having sorbet for dessert, and it didn't bother her at all. In that case, it was time for them to go to their guests. It was the prince and the duke. Wade sat on the couch next to Claude. He told him and Kieran to take care of this Sergio, and he would go with his beloved Camillus and look at the stars. But Claude objected that His Highness needed to stay here to resolve all matters. Wade realized that Claude was worried about Leos. I see you no longer treat him like a copy of your brother. A sudden change of heart, Wade said to Claude, noticing his affection for Leos. Claude replied that his thoughts were not changing. He was just rather funny. And looking at Leos, his mood was lifted. The boy told the prince how a couple of days ago he had offered him a job as a butler in the Ihar house, but he had refused. Wade asked if it hurt him so much that he would take revenge with humiliation until he got tired of it. Claude replied that on the contrary, now he wanted it even more. Camillus is a work of art that Mrs. Anastasia worked so hard on. He is unique among all these rotten nobility. He is not like all these pigs hiding behind the titles of their fathers, who themselves are nothing. Therefore, he wants to make him his own. Wade von Weise and Claude de Ishar introduced themselves to Ian Sergio. Ian asked Claude if he was the ruler of Del Casa. Claude replied that his father was still in good health. Ian pointed out that whatever his father owned would be his anyway. Claude thanked him for looking after Kieran and Gayor. Leo stood and wondered when it would all end and why he needed to be there. He was glad that Mrs. Anastasia would come now, and they would communicate without him. But when Prince Ian was called to go into another room, he said that he would be late because he needed to finish his conversation with Camillus. Everyone was surprised by this, and Claude said that His Highness was waiting for him. And Leos asked to postpone the conversation for later since His Highness was much more important. But His Majesty, Ian Sergio said, "You are wrong, Camillus. You are more important to me. You still haven't told me why you were crying." Claude looked at them, not knowing what to do. And Kieran interrupted Ian with his stern look. And Ian answered him that he was just teasing Laius. Then, Claude invited everyone to enter the hall. Sitting at the table, Wade asked Mistress Anastasia if Camillus would like to join them. Anastasia replied that Leos had returned to his quarters and was not feeling well. Her long absence had probably taken its toll on him, and now she would make sure he was looked after properly. And Claude didn't understand her, because the prince said he had found Laius crying alone on the street. Claude thought that no one would want to eat in such a setting. "Looks like it's all sweets again today," he said out loud. Mrs. Anastasia, who was sitting nearby, heard this and asked what he meant. And Prince Ian put some food on a plate and asked the maid to take it to Leos's room. And he asked me to tell him that refusing food is harmful to his health. But if his health worsens, he can always take him with him to Gayor. Mrs. Anastasia was angry, and Kieran thanked him for his concern and said that they would remember his offer just in case. But Kieran thought to himself that this place was not suitable for such a defenseless girl. Even Georg looked like a fairy tale compared to this lion's den. Prince Ian said that in his opinion, this place is not suitable for Leos, and he asked Claude what he thought. Claude was silent. Then Ian said he meant venison. In Georg, it is considered a delicacy. But Claude apologized for what he had to say next. The meat from Georg does not deserve a place on the imperial table. The appearance, how can I say? I thought they brought me something rotten, Claude continued. Claude decided to end this squabble and asked the ladies' permission to join them later when the drinks were brought, and he went out for a walk along the corridor. The boy walked down the corridor and wondered if Camillus was avoiding him to have fun with the visiting savage. Suddenly, he noticed a maid with a tray. Then Claude stopped her and asked if this was food for Camillus. He asked her to bring him some sweets from the table instead of this food. The maid said that it was the prince who asked for this food to be brought to him. And Claude asked if she really wanted to feed him this slop from Georg. Claude said to her, "Let's take Camillus something he really likes." When the maid went to Leos's door with a bowl of candy and knocked on the door, no one opened the door. Outside stood Betty and the rest of the maids with whom Leah had lived for 4 years. They said they had decided to throw her a farewell party. Leah was pleased that all these people showed so much concern for her. They asked her not to forget about them when she got to the capital and thanked her for her kindness to them. When Betty approached her, Leah hugged her tightly and asked her to promise that she would take care of herself after she left. Betty said that she had already instructed Pippi about her tasks, so they should not have any difficulties. Leah thanked Betty for her concern. Betty also asked not to wander around at night and to be careful with strangers, especially those who will entice with candy. They are the worst. And asked to be sure to find Mom. Leah was sitting at the table thinking that she was probably seeing everyone here for the last time. Suddenly, the maid brought a bowl of sweets, and behind her stood Mr. Claude. When Leah was younger, she thought of him as a typically arrogant nobleman, but there is no word that can describe Claude d'Ichard. He's the type of person who makes you nervous for fear of being laughed at. Someone who likes to fool around sometimes. Someone who smells like lavender. A mysterious man who shows kindness when you least expect it. But I'm not a little kid who loves sweets anymore, Leah thought, putting a candy in her mouth. The next morning, the maids were saying goodbye to Camilla outside. Kieran came out to say goodbye and hugged Leah tightly. He apologized for his mother, who would not be able to come out. Kieran asked her not to take it personally and reminded her that he would soon visit her and eat her. "Okay, then I'll go," Leah said. Prince Sergio wanted to hug Laios goodbye, but he was cold and said, "Take care of yourself." Ian asked why he hated him so much. Laios replied that it was not like that at all. Ian just kept putting him in an awkward position. Laios wanted to get into the carriage, but Prince Wade was already sitting there. Since the prince was very ill after the Georg wine, he said that he was taking the carriage for himself and Laios would have to find another one. "Are you coming?" Claude asked Laios, standing next to his car. Kieran suggested that Laios take up Claude's offer. After all, a car is much faster than a carriage, and Kieran promised that it would be fun. And also, Claude would be able to take care of him. Ian laughed at these words. "Shouldn't he be the one to worry about first?" he said to Laios. But Laios replied that he didn't know what he was talking about. Then, Ian grabbed Leah's hand and whispered in her ear, "All men are animals, Camellia. Be careful!" Leah was outraged by his words. Claude asked Laios to hurry up. When Laios got into the carriage, apologizing for the delay, Claude said it was not his fault. But in fact, they are late because His Highness got drunk on that crap from Georg. And since Laios finished with the farewells, they went. Laios was swaying violently from the fast ride. Claude held his hand. He asked if Laios was eating well, as his arms were very thin. Laios replied that his stomach was like a bottomless pit, and the candies that Mr. Claude had sent him were so sweet that his lips were stuck together. Mr. Claude brought his hand to his face and sniffed it. He said he still smelled like candy, and it seemed sweeter than he thought. When Laios fell asleep in the car because of the long journey, Claude looked at him and thought that he had not changed at all in all these years. His smell was so attractive to Claude. He seemed too sweet to him, as for a man. And nothing about him was like a man. Claude thought he was going crazy. and he kissed his lips. When Leah got out of the carriage, she thought that she must have hit her head while sleeping, because her head hurt at the sight of the injury, and her lips were wet for some reason. She hoped she hadn't been drooling in her sleep. They approached a beautiful house with flowers. Claude asked why Leos would live here instead of in the dorms. He replied that his father was worried that he would not be able to cope with the dorm lifestyle. "Someone like you would get the biggest room in the dorm," Claude told him. Leos replied that he was a rather private person. Then Claude remembered how calmly he had behaved with the man he had just met. It seemed that his shyness did not extend to foreigners. Once they were inside the house, Claude asked Leos why he had not stayed at Marquis Bale's house. He replied that the place was too big for him, but Claude didn't believe it and asked if there was another reason. Then they went up the stairs to Leos's room. It was beautiful. The view from the window was wonderful, and in Corsair there was nothing but forests and trees. Claude said to enjoy it while he could. The city gets noisy at night, and he asked what the Marquis was thinking when he sent him here to live alone. Leos didn't understand why Claude was so upset that he wouldn't be living in the dormitory. As he was leaving, Claude told Leos to eat less sweets and to have a proper meal at least once. Otherwise, he himself would soon turn into one big candy. What's wrong with him? Leah thought. She checked to see if he was really gone by looking out the door. And then she opened her closet with her dresses and wig. Mom will never recognize me if I look like a boy, thought Leah, holding the wig in her hands. But she was worried that she had changed so much that her mother would not recognize her anyway. Claude sat in his pool and remembered that kiss. The driver noticed it too. Damn, he's a man, Claude thought, and covered his face with his hands. In the morning, standing by the window, Claude reflected that not only did Leos not look like a man, but he had also settled in a place more suitable for a girl. He thought that his feeling was just ordinary curiosity. But his thoughts were interrupted by a servant who brought him a letter that had been delivered from the palace. A few days before, when Camillus arrived at the academy, everyone was whispering behind his back about how he was the Marquis's youngest son and how he didn't look like a boy at all. He was met by a professor he already knew and led to the examination room. The professor praised Leos and said that he couldn't wait to find out his exam results. On the way to the office, they met Claude. He was standing and not looking at Leos at all, as if he was running away from his gaze, and Leos did not understand what had happened to him. When Leos entered the office, the guys in the hallway started talking about him and insulting him, saying that he was a bastard born in a swamp, and how dare Marquis Bale bring him to the academy. And then Claude stood up for them and said that they had no right to insult the son of the Marquis of Bale, the favorite of the emperor, and they themselves were empty-headed sons of small counts. One of them said that he didn't mean anything bad. He just meant that Leos was easy prey for all sorts of perverts. Claude was scared by this phrase. When everyone gathered in the auditorium for Leos's examination, the director said that he expected a lot from him. Claude did not like the director's behavior. Leos remembered his classes with a teacher who said that the academy teaches society. That is, they study the ideal society in which people get what they deserve, and that a person's future does not depend on his social status. And also in the academy, they teach mathematics and literature to understand how to build such a society. But in fact, he was very uncomfortable at the academy. And this is not an entrance exam at all. For them, he is simply a nobody with rumors about his birth. And they don't care about his knowledge. They check what he should know as part of the noble family. Decide if he is worthy of being part of it. This is what the famous academy consists of. It seemed to him that his expectations were too high. The exam time was over, and why the director came. He said he hoped Leos had done his best. He asked them to wait a bit so they could check everything. Leos noticed that Claude was still there. The panel praised Leos for his excellent performance. He was the first to receive a perfect score since Kieran Bale. It seems that this genius runs in their blood. His Highness, Wade, praised Leos and said that he lived up to his reputation. Leos replied that he just had a good memory. That was the whole secret. Prince Wade said that this was also the hardest part. He added that since he had the highest score, he could choose which class to join. The director said that he could have chosen a dormitory, but in his case, it would not be useful. But he thought that the 9th grade would suit Leos best. Leos asked if he should answer now, and the professor said he had a week to do so and offered to give him a tour of the academy. But Claude offered to give Laios a tour of the academy himself. The professor said it was unexpected, but Claude reminded him how long he had waited for Laios to enter the academy. Then Leah remembered how the professor had persuaded his father and said that the Ihar household hoped to see Camillus at the academy as soon as possible. So it was true. Claude put his arm around Laios's waist and led him on a tour. Prince Ian, who was watching this, thought, "Well, well," but said nothing, just watched them go. Holding his hand, Claude led Laios outside. Anne told him that Laios would not go to the 9th grade. Laios was surprised because the director said that his knowledge was enough. Claude said that director Eddie Kirchman was looking at him very suspiciously, and there were a lot of strange rumors about him. "Is that all?" Laios asked, surprised. "You don't understand?" asked Claude. But Laios told Claude that he was there as a student and was not interested in gossip about the professors. Looking back, Leah didn't realize that her thoughts were too preoccupied with the uncertain future. Her goal was to graduate as soon as possible. After all, when Kieran returned home and her mother was found, she would no longer be able to continue her studies here, and she didn't want to create more problems. When Laios replied to Claude, "What difference does it make what the professor's orientation is?" "It doesn't apply to me at all," Claude asked in surprise. "It doesn't apply, then? Are you sure about that?" Then Laios asked to leave the topic and said that he would think about his words. Laios saw the racetrack and began asking about the horses and the famous stable of the academy. Claude asked him not to change the subject and choose the 8th grade, because he wouldn't be able to breathe if he chose the 9th grade, and he would sit over textbooks the whole year. Leah wondered why he hadn't explained everything about the class to her right away. When a horse came up to them, Laios wanted to pet it, but Claude took her hand away, saying that the horse might bite. When Claude saw his shiny lips again, which were so inviting, he wanted to kiss them. But he came to his senses in time and said that he had something on his face and needed to be removed. Claude noticed 2 guys in uniform approaching them. He then asked Laios to go to his house, straight down the road, and they would continue the tour another time. The boys said they had come to escort Mr. Claude, as he had received permission from His Majesty, but on the condition that his men join the city guard. This meant that the Emperor had allowed him to investigate. Claude asked if they had found the culprit. His Majesty thought that he could not have gone far and that there was only one place, lower. Claude had given orders to find a man familiar with the area, and they would go out to investigate tonight. The boy stroked his horse thoughtfully. In the evening, near Camelia's house, Pippi asked if she could cope alone. Camelia was beautiful, in a chic dress with long hair. Pippi was worried that it would be dangerous for her to go out dressed like that. People would immediately know that she was not from around here. Leah replied that Pippi did not know Lower as well as she did. Leah asked Pippi about her hair, if it made her stand out too much. Pippi replied that they hadn't seen each other for too long and she wouldn't recognize her without it. Then Camelia thought that Pippi was right and said to her, "I'll be back soon." The coachman gave her a lift and said, "Wait for me in the northern part until I return." He asked if she was familiar with the area. The girl replied that she was familiar enough to survive. Leah recognized the place right there around the corner where she lived with her mother. Leah ran. The house was so close. A guy came around the corner and she bumped into him and almost fell, but he caught her. It was Claude. "Camillus?" The first thing Claude thought and asked, looking into the girl's eyes. "Mr. Claude?" "But what is he doing here?" thought Leah. Leah covered her head with her hood and turned to leave. Claude apologized for confusing her with someone else. He thought that his eyes were already making fun of him. Well, it can't be that this girl is Camillus. Then he asked her to tell him her name, but she remained silent. Leah thought he was too close to her and remained silent. Claude asked if she was mute, but then he thought that at least she could hear him. Claude offered to take her if she was lost or needed help. After all, these streets are no place for a lonely, beautiful lady. As Leah followed Claude, she noticed that he was leaving marks on the wall. The girl wondered what to do now. He would guess who she was right away. She decided to overtake him and go first. Claude realized that she was a local because she knew the road well. And the guy asked, after all, she was not really mute. Leah saw a carriage ahead and rushed forward. Claude ran after her. She paid the coachman and asked him to say that he had dropped her off south of the Lyon Bridge, in front of the statue of St. Matthew. When the carriage left, Claude ordered that they find the carriage crossing the bridge, adding that it seemed they had found someone who could lead them through the slums of Lower. Leah didn't sleep all night, wondering if Claude had recognized her. The place was very close, just a few steps away, and she was interrupted at such an inopportune time. Suddenly, Pippi ran into the room and said that Mr. Laios needed to get dressed urgently. He shouldn't be seen like that. After all, Mr. Claude had arrived to see them. When Laios came out into the living room, Claude was already sitting at the table. He said that someone had woken up late. Laios apologized and said that he had not slept well. Laios asked what brought Mr. Claude to him at such an early hour. And he asked Laios if he didn't know. Laios replied that he couldn't read minds. Claude asked Laios to have a proper breakfast because the Bayes had to visit a place. His brother Kieran asked him to show him life in the imperial capital. When they were in the city center, Claude asked Laios to fill in these streets. The beginning of all roads is measured from this building, Cohen's Bank. The boy said that since he was accepted straight into the 9th year, it should be easy for him to remember the surroundings. Laios remembered this place from his lessons. The academy is 2.7 miles to the northeast, and the imperial palace is 3 miles from Cohen's Bank. Claude praised Laios for learning quickly, but for some reason, he had a strange feeling around Laios. He became impulsive. Not only did he want to kiss him, but he also called the girl by his name. It was a terrible feeling, and also an inappropriate behavior for him. When they reached the river, where the monument was visible, Laios said that all the people here looked so happy, and that life in Eder was probably very comfortable. But Claude replied that darkness always follows light. The stronger the light, the thicker the darkness, and you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Then Laios said that people living in darkness do not know that they are not in the light, and ignorance is bliss, he continued, looking at the slums on the other side of the river. Claude became curious and asked why Laios thought that. He answered that happiness is relative, and we always think that life is unfair only when we see those who are better than us. But if we remain naive from the start, all we will know is the life we were born into, and it is not about satisfying needs. Claude suggested that he take a break from these sad thoughts and move on. He gave him a jar of candy again and called him a child who loved sweets. While Laios asked that Claude was not much older than him, the boy opened the carriage door and said that since he had seen the bright side, it was time to show the dark side in the slums of Lower. As they were driving, Laios asked if they were really going to Lower and why, and Claude asked what he had heard about that place. Laios replied that it was best to stay away from it. Then Claude asked him if he knew that Lower was just beyond Lyon, which his windows overlooked. Laios thought he had to say something so as not to be found out. "Oh, really? And I was wondering why that side of the river is always darker at night. I had no idea. So it's the Lower?" Laios replied. When they got out of the carriage, Claude said that Lower was the folly and shame of the empire, a thorn in the heavenly garden. Leah thought he suspected something, and thus he tests Laios. But he must not swallow the bait. That is why Laios said that he felt sick just from the smell of this place. Laios asked to leave, but Claude said that he would have to endure. After all, for them it was just a dump, but for someone this place is called home. The bright light of the city cast a large shadow over the place. Leah disagreed, but forced herself to remain silent so as not to give herself away. Laios begged Claude very much to take him home, because this place scared him very much, and Claude agreed to take him home. As they rode in the carriage, Claude apologized to Camillus for being shocked by the place. For some reason, he thought that Laios already knew him, but Laios said that he was here for the first time, and Leah hoped that Claude believed this legend, because it was difficult to tell from his face. Laios occasionally glanced at Claude. Claude told Laios that he would drive him home first, and then he had a dinner appointment. Laios replied that they would have to hurry then, and Claude was offended because he expected a different answer from him. It seemed to him that Laios always looked happy when he had to leave. But Laios replied that this was not so, and that he would be happy to have dinner with him that evening. Then Claude said that he could reschedule their meeting for another day. "You can't. That would be very rude of you," Laios replied. They were about to say goodbye, standing near Camilius's house. But Claude noticed a white horse near the house and told Camilius that it looked like he had guests, and, apparently, named ones, as Claude believed. When they entered the house, they saw Prince Ian Sergio, who had arrived from Gayor. He was lying on the sofa, and as always, he was happy to see Camilla. Leos reminded Claude that he was in a hurry to get to a meeting, and Claude said that it would be better for His Highness to stay at his estate in the capital, but Camillus objected. After all, Prince Ian is a guest of the Bale household, and that would be wrong. "So you'll let him stay? Alone with you?" Claude asked, and took back his jar of candies. Camillus asked him what kind of gentleman takes his gifts back, and Claude replied that he didn't want to smell like candy. Ian came very close to Laius and whispered, "Camillus, forget about the sweets and eat properly. I've been waiting for you all day, and I'm very hungry." Leos reprimanded Ian for being too close. "I will treat you, Your Highness. Camillus has only just arrived in the capital. I will be the best guide for you," said Claude. "But still, I prefer the company of Camillus," said Ian. But Claude insisted that he would be safer in his company, after all. This was the capital of another state. Prince Ian said that Claude was right, but since he was very tired from the long journey, he would spend the rest of the day here, resting with Camillus, which meant he wasn't going anywhere. But it was time for Lord Claude to go. Claude didn't know what else to say, so he went to the meeting. The gentleman said that he no longer thought that Mr. Claude would be able to honor them with his visit, but he came anyway. Claude apologized and said that he had some business to attend to. The man asked if Claude's father was still surrounded in neutral territory, and it would be an honor to receive the Grand Duke here in the imperial capital. Claude replied that his father had no plans to visit for the time being. The empire's security depended on the north, and his father was a very pragmatic man. Then the gentleman got to the point and said that his daughter had recently become engaged, and they were thinking of holding her wedding after the wedding ceremony of Princess Rosina and Lord Kieran Bale. When Claude imagined Camillus next to this girl, he felt uneasy, but he said that he would definitely inform his father about this and that happy events should be celebrated together. The owner of the house said that he couldn't stop thinking about what could have delayed Monsieur Claude, because he was always so punctual. Claude replied that there were matters that still required his attention, and asked for forgiveness for the time he had to leave them. When the coachman asked Mr. Claude where he wanted to take him, he immediately said to Camillus. Then he corrected himself, saying to go to the estate. He couldn't get the memory out of his head of how Leos separated him from Ian and said, "Mr. Claude, the prince will stay in the Bale house, period." Claude didn't like the way Leos called Ian by his first name, and it bothered him that the damn prince had some kind of unhealthy interest in Camillus. Otherwise, he wouldn't. His thoughts were interrupted by a message from the guy in uniform. "Mr. Claude, we found her. That night there was only one dark green carriage crossing the bridge. According to the driver, the passenger got off at the statue of St. Matthew. It was a girl in expensive clothes." Claude thought something was wrong here. He knew that the only estate in that area belonged to the Ihars, but since they had not received guests that night, it meant that the driver had lied. "Is this candy the problem?" Leah thought as she looked at the jar. Prince Ian, sitting on the sofa, insisted that Laios eat something other than this candy. Leah offered the prince one candy and put it in his mouth. Ian deliberately licked her hand. This was inappropriate behavior for a member of the royal family. Leo said that it was time for him to return to his quarters, and that His Highness could move to their family estate once he had rested. But the prince insisted that he wanted to talk to Leah face to face, since they had not had the opportunity. She replied that she had nothing to tell him, but still, he persuaded her to sit next to him on the couch and asked if Claude knew that she was a girl. Leah replied that even the walls have eyes and ears, and she was uncomfortable with this conversation. Ian asked how long Leia planned to continue this masquerade. The girl replied that she did not know. Then the prince got down to business. His father wants him to find a wife among the nobility of the Cayenne Empire. A marriage alliance is the best way to establish diplomatic relations. Leah said that if he wanted advice, she didn't know any suitable ladies. But Prince Ian said he didn't need advice. At that time, Leah didn't understand what he wanted. "Your father, Marquis Bale, is an imperial noble, and I'm going to formally ask him for your hand and heart," Ian stunned her. Leah protested that she was a man, but the prince knew perfectly well that she was a woman. He was already dreaming about the ceremony they would hold next year, and also that she can make her formal debut before the wedding ceremony, like Camellia Bale, and return to her real self. "Prince Ian!" Leah exclaimed. "What? You've already given your heart to someone else?" "Oh, let me guess. Claude Deschard?" Ian asked. "Don't rush. We have a whole year. Think it over carefully. I can save you from that witch you call mother." Leah replied that there was no need for that. Ian thought she would be delighted and asked if she didn't want to be a girl again. Leah replied that she wasn't a real noblewoman, and it would be right to leave it all behind when it was over. Ian asked her again how long she was going to live a lie. Leah didn't want to continue the conversation. Leah asked how he could ask for her hand in marriage when they had only met 3 times. Ian replied, "Okay, then there will be a funeral." The girl asked if he had eavesdropped on their conversation with Anastasia, and Ian replied that she had been very abrupt and loud, and many had heard their conversation at the time. But Leah replied that the idea of marriage did not suit her. She did not want to participate in these political games, and she asked not to involve her in diplomacy and alliances. Then Prince Ian told her that it wasn't as complicated as it sounded, and he just fell in love with her, that's all. Camellia was surprised. The prince repeated that they would have a whole year to get to know each other better, and he said that he would wait for her answer until next year. Ian also told Leah that Kieran was coming back in 10 days, so they had 10 happy days alone together. The next day, as she walked to the academy, Leah remembered Ian's words about them being together for 10 whole days, and she mentally asked Kieran to come back soon. Suddenly, Lord Thorin, the guy who insulted her to Clodagh, called out to her. Lias greeted him, and he said that he expected to see Kieran Bale, not a useless impostor. Leos replied that his brother had no intention of returning to the academy. Thorin laughed at the fact that Kieran had been in Gayor for 4 years and had already defected. Then Thorin said that Kieran probably knew that only graduates of the academy could claim noble titles. "Oh, you haven't heard? Kieran graduated 4 years ago," Leos told him with a smile. Leos laughed at Thorin's lack of awareness of recent events. And it's not surprising, because it's easy to miss something without friends to share the news with. Thorin was hurt by this and decided to say something offensive. He said that everyone knows that Leos got into the academy because of his cute face. And since he's only a first year, he's not stupid enough to make enemies. "You don't want to disgrace your father's good name, do you?" "You already know that. You disgrace the House of Bale," Thorin whispered to Leos. Leos clenched his hand into a fist. Leos pulled himself together and said in a calm tone, "Lord Thorin, you continue to look down on someone the Marquise has acknowledged. How dare a nameless family like yours tarnish the Marquise's name? You were brave enough to name him, but stupid enough to make such a powerful enemy as the Marquis of Bale. And don't forget that I'm not a first-year student just like you, and I'm in my 9th year of study," Leos added. He also asked the surprised Thorin not to catch his eye again. Leah became sad. She wondered when she became like this. Yes, she understood that this was the best way to deal with such people. But what to do? She got carried away and spilled everything to this idiot about 9th grade, and everyone around was already whispering about it. Leah thought that Claude would definitely give her a dressing down for this. As they sat in the office, the professor told Leos that he knew he would choose the 9th grade. And it was a great honor for the academy to teach such an outstanding student, right after his brother. Leos asked the professor if he could tell why the officer was there. Was it because he had had a row with Lord Thorin in the street? The officer asked Leos, "Sir, is this your natural voice? Do you know how to protect yourself? Do you know how to handle a dagger?" Leos did not raise the point of these questions, and the professor told the officer that he would not find a better candidate. And the officer agreed with him. "Mr. Bale, I am here to ask for your cooperation on behalf of the City Watch," the officer continued. "This may put you in a difficult situation, but the lives of the city's citizens are at stake. And I am sure you will do as is proper. We are looking for a man who can pretend to be a noble lady," the officer finished. Leos did not know what to answer. Sitting in a cafe on the street, Leos was thinking about refusing the officer's offer. But he remembered everything the officer had told him, that a criminal is attacking noblewomen and the parents are so scared that they won't give their daughter as bait. They need to catch the criminal as soon as possible. He'll need to show up at the library, the theater, the station, basically, at landmarks around Lower. And Lius is the one they've been looking for. Leah had already decided that she would refuse the officer's application when suddenly she saw a woman riding past in a cart. It was her mother. The girl immediately ran after the cart and shouted for the driver to stop, and she called for her mother. She couldn't catch up with her, but Leah knew for sure that it was her mother, and she was so close. Claude was drinking tea with the officer and asked him if Camillus had agreed. The officer replied that he had not yet, but most likely he would. Pretending to be a woman? Whose idea was that absurd? Claude asked. The officer replied that apprehending the criminal was their top priority, but Claude was against it and said that this was his best friend's beloved brother. And if even one hair fell from his head, they would all pay for it. There was a knock at the door, and they were told that the man they were waiting for had arrived. Camillus entered the office and gave his consent to the undercover job. Then, Lius noticed Mr. Claude in the office. Well? Claude got up and left, ignoring Lius. He told the officer that he had to go to a meeting. The officer told Lius that Mr. Claude didn't like their idea. Lius asked if he knew about their business. The man was surprised that Lius didn't know, because they were friends. The officer replied that Monsieur Claude had supplied them with sufficient men for this investigation, so he had been aware of the matter from the very beginning. The officer then asked if Lius was acquainted with Mrs. Marilyn Shelby. After all, it was she who recommended him for this case, and she's looking forward to meeting him soon. But not now, of course. But in 4 days at the Shelby estate. Leah was very surprised by this. Claude stood outside, stroking his horse. He wondered if Lius had really agreed to this investigation, and why it bothered him so much. Prince Wade came galloping to Mr. Claude on his horse. He told him the news that Lius had entered the 9th year of study, and about him disgracing Lord Thorin in a verbal conversation. Wade told Claude that this Camillus was a very interesting guy. Claude said that Lord Thorin just got what he deserved. Prince Wade asked, "Is that all? I was just wondering if you and I share the same preferences." The same preferences. The phrase kept popping into Claude's head. The maid Pippi stood at the door and did not let Prince Ian in when he wanted to leave the house. She said that Master Lius had forbidden him to go out because it was dangerous. Pippi begged him not to do anything that might cause trouble to Mr. Lius, but the prince did not listen to her and left the house. Ian left with a man in a black suit and a black hat. The prince ordered him to return to his brother and tell him to expect him in a year. The man replied that it was impossible, as His Majesty had ordered him to return immediately. Ian joked that his brother must have missed him already, and there was no brotherly love between them. To this, the man replied that the situation had changed. The conflict on neutral territory was intensifying every day, so his safety was paramount. Safety? He's just worried that there won't be anyone to fight in the front lines if there's a war, Ian replied. After all, his brother knew that there was no better warrior in Geor than Ian. That's why he had arranged for surveillance in the form of this man in black clothes. Ian asked him if his brother's plan had a chance of success. The man remained silent. Then Ian asked me to tell my brother that it was too early to make a move. It would be a shame to see the Cayenne Empire collapse. There are too many beautiful things in this place, Ian said when he saw Leah. Prince Ian, what were you thinking leaving the house alone? The locals hate the people of Geor, Leah said as she stepped out of the carriage, but the prince replied that he wanted to see her as soon as possible. He offered her his hand like a real lady, and he said that next to her he felt like a puppy. Walking near the academy, the director asked Lius if he was going to stay after a week here. Lius replied that the local life suited him, so he was staying. Then, Lius asked the principal why Claude did not attend lectures. The principal replied that Mr. Claude was not there to attend school classes. The answer surprised Leah. It turns out that Claude is here to keep an eye on the prince, since His Highness has quite a freedom-loving character, perhaps even too much. It started raining, and the principal said it looked like the rainy season had arrived, and Leah thought, how ironic. It was raining when they took me away from Lower, and it's raining again when I get back. Marilyn Shelby welcomed Lius into her home. He apologized for missing her last party, but she said it was just a get-well party. The girl thanked Lius and said that she did not expect that he would actually agree to help Uncle Brighton. Leah thanked her in return. But in fact, Leah thought that Marilyn looked like someone who was up to something. Then, Marilyn said that she was very concerned about the credibility. She was worried that a man dressed as a woman would look very suspicious, after all. Leah said he was also very worried about it. Pippi came into their room, and Leos rushed to her. Leah was happy that she was not alone here anymore. She was not comfortable alone with Marilyn. Marilyn didn't like that there would be someone else with them. And she said that cooking is a very long process for a girl, and it will take them even longer. They went into Marilyn's room with the dresses, and Leos chose a wig with long chestnut-colored hair. The servant asked if he could recommend a wig the color of his blonde hair. Leah remembered that meeting with Claude in the dark alley and thought, "No, I can't let him recognize me." And then Leos replied that it would be a useless disguise. Pippi asked the servant to leave the room so that she could change Mr. Lios's clothes herself, explaining that he did not like strangers approaching him. "I was truly touched, sir, when I learned that you took everything into your own hands for me," Marilyn thanked Monsieur Claude. Marilyn said she knew he wouldn't let this move go unpunished. She thought he was worried about her. Since she was fine now, she asked him not to worry. But Claude said that unrest was spreading among the nobility, and as part of the Ihar house, he felt it was his responsibility to sort this out in such difficult times. Marilyn said that being Camilius's escort was too much. Claude tried to distance himself from him as much as he could, but he was back to square one again. He even almost refused the officer's request to accompany Camilius. But when he learned that this would be entrusted to someone else, he immediately agreed. His conversation with Marilyn was interrupted when the maid informed him that Camilius was ready to show himself to them in his finery. When Leah came out to Marilyn in a dress and with gorgeous chestnut hair, she lowered her eyes to the floor. And she didn't even immediately notice Mr. Claude. "Why is he here?" flashed through Leah's mind when she noticed Claude sitting on the living room couch. Claude said that Leos looked very good in this image, and no one would suspect that he was the son of the Marquis of Bale. Leah thanked Claude for appreciating her disguise. She also asked what brought Mr. Claude here. He replied that Officer Brighton had ordered him to keep an eye on her safety. Claude was unhappy that he had to take part in this strange affair, because Leos had agreed to the officer's request. Camilius said that he probably looked very strange next to such a beauty as Marilyn, and she asked Leos, "So why the chestnut wig?" Then Leos would enthusiastically tell how suspicious it would be to walk around with his hair color. And Claude would look at him and think, "Damn you, Camilius." The servant, at Marilyn's request, brought a box containing a thin steel necklace. Marilyn said that the jewelry was made from the material used in knight's armor, and it will help protect her throat in case of an attack. The lady wanted to put the decoration on Camilius's neck, but Claude stopped her and asked to let him do it. "Camilius, with or without him, you are safe. Understood?" asked Mr. Claude, fastening the ornament on Leah's neck. She answered yes, and Mrs. Marilyn looked at them with her angry and jealous gaze. Then, Claude turned to her that it was time for him to leave. After Claude left, Marilyn told Leah that she had noticed something interesting. Despite Leos's graceful appearance, she thought the disguise would be noticeable. But Marilyn admitted that when she looks at him in women's clothing, even a real woman like her pales next to him. When the lady sent Leos away, saying that Monsieur Claude was already waiting for him, she asked her maid who had helped Camilius change his clothes. The maid replied that his personal maid had helped him change. Marilyn did not understand what was happening to her and why she was jealous of Claude for a man. The girl asked her maid to stay in the room with Camilius next time until he finished changing, so that the important guest would not be left without attention. "No matter how handsome you look, you're just a man." Still, better safe than sorry, thought Mrs. Marilyn Shelby. Leah and Claude were riding in the car, and there was a moment of awkward silence. Then, Claude interrupted and asked why Leos was so anxious to get there now, although when they were in Lower, he was shaking like a little child, and now he was asking to go there himself. Claude didn't understand what had changed so abruptly. Leo said that he was asked to help. And it turns out that only he can do it, so he must complete this task. Then Claude handed Leah a blade and showed her where to strike if she needed to defend herself. He held her hair and showed her the place on her leg where to aim. He pressed her so close to him and asked, "Do you understand, Camilius?" Claude touched her neck with his hand and wanted to kiss her. Leah liked it, but she could not give herself away. Leah wondered why there were so many students from the academy here. And besides, what was Thorin doing here? Why was he following me? Did he recognize me? And by the way, where's the help that Mr. Claude mentioned? He said that there would be a person in the library who could help. Suddenly, Leah bumped into a man who said that it seemed that Mr. Thorin had his eye on her. It was the director, Eddie Kirchman. Seeing that the boy was looking at them, he said, "Please forgive my bad manners, my lady. How stupid of me not to recognize the niece of Princess Rosina's cousin." Leah said she hadn't expected to see him as an assistant and asked if it had been difficult for him to remember all the streets of Lower. But Mr. Eddie replied that it was not difficult at all since he grew up there. The director said that the girl that came out of Lius was the very embodiment of beauty. "Now I understand why he's so fussed over you. You're quite possibly guilty of this, Mr. Bale," added director Eddie Kirchman. Leo said he wasn't sure he understood him. "Not to be rude, but instead, I'd like to hear what your plan is," Leo said, getting down to business. The director continued that, as he had already said, he knew the area like the back of his hand. Therefore, tonight, Leah was to be kidnapped, and she, as a girl, should not resist. When she was kidnapped, he would signal the city guard. Leah realized that he wanted to set up an ambush. The principal asked if she could handle it. Leah said she could. She knew that if she got to Lower safely, she would be able to find her mother faster than she thought. Out of the blue, Mr. Eddie asked her if she had thought about becoming a professor after graduation. Leah noticed this look on herself, but she answered, like Laius, that he didn't have any concrete plans for the future yet, but he wasn't sure if it would suit him. The director persuaded him to work for him. After all, it was his life's dream for such a talented student to grow up under his guidance. Leo said that if that was all, then he needed time to prepare, and therefore asked him to forgive him and said that he would find the director later. But Mr. Eddie grabbed his hand and said, "Just one question. How did you do it? I'm curious, how did you manage to pretend to be a girl so perfectly?" Officer Brighton pointed out on the map that the hideout was somewhere near this bell tower. Claude asked him if the informant had given the exact location. It turns out that they move from place to place every day, so they most likely have many hiding places throughout the Lower. Also, Eddie Kirchman gave them this map, and he would be accompanying Camillus on the mission to Lower. Claude didn't like that. He asked if this was the same Eddie Kirchman from the academy. The officer confirmed and added that he was supposed to meet Camillus in the library now. Claude was angry. The officer thought he was sick and asked if everything was okay. And Claude said that if something happened to Camillus, they would all pay for it with their lives. "I'm curious, how did you do that?" Professor Eddie continued. "Show me what you're wearing. Is that a nightgown?" he asked, trying to undress her. Leah remembered Claude's words, that there were many different rumors about him. Did Mr. Claude really mean that he was pestering his own students? "Don't you dare touch me, I'm warning you," Leah said, pointing the dagger Claude had given her at him. The professor said there was nothing to be embarrassed about. They were both men, and he just wanted to satisfy his curiosity and not harm Leos. At that moment, Claude's long sword flashed around his neck. "I think I already warned you not to touch the students," the boy said, standing between Leah and Eddie. The director tried to calm Claude down, but he made him apologize to Leos. Then Eddie said that Leos is not a little child anymore and can stand up for himself. Claude replied that his tongue should be cut out. Leah asked him to stop. Then Claude asked why Leos was defending this idiot. Leos replied that he was not protecting anyone. It was just the Imperial Library, and there were too many prying eyes here. Then Claude gave him his final warning. The director left, asking Camillus to forget this little misunderstanding. And Leos thanked Claude for his help. But Claude was angry. He knew what the director wanted to do. He said he warned Leos, and Leos said he didn't know he would be his assistant. Leos asked Claude to let him go. But Claude asked, "Let him go? Who will you hide behind then? Have you ever stood up for yourself like a man in your life?" To this, Laios replied that he had never hidden behind anyone, and he would be able to take care of himself. Somehow he had survived to this day without his help. "Why do you always treat me like this? What did I do to make you angry? Is it because I'm not manly enough?" Leos couldn't help but ask. "That's right, you irritate me. You get on my nerves." "I hate you, Camillus Bale." Claude said, pinning Leos against the bookshelf. Leos said he knew about it from the moment he called it a fake and promised to do his best to stay out of his way in the future. Did something happen today? What about that criminal? Are you hurt anywhere? Pippi asked Leah, who was lying face down on her bed. Leah smiled at Pippi and replied that everything was fine and the task would be another time. It was just that the dress didn't fit very well, and Leah was tired of wearing it. But more importantly, Leah was very hungry and asked if dinner was ready. Pippi happily ran to set the table and told her to come down in 5 minutes. Leah lay back down on her bed and looked out the window, remembering Claude's words. "I hate you, Camelius Bale." She felt like a fool. "Changed already? What a pity. You were irresistible," Ian said, entering Leah's room. He asked why she was suddenly wearing a dress. Leah replied that she had some things to do today, and asked why his hair was wet. Ian wanted to kiss her, but Leah stopped him. Ian said his intentions were pure, and he only wanted to warm her up. Leah replied that she was not cold. Ian insisted that, since it was the rainy season, he could go at any time. But Leah still refused his embrace and got out of bed, saying that a bowl of soup would warm her up. "This indifference is part of your charm, but sometimes it really upsets me," Ian told her. Unexpectedly, Leah asked Ian to teach her how to handle a dagger. Later, on the street, Ian taught her self-defense and showed her the weak points of her opponent. The girl remembered how Claude had shown her the same points. Why did she keep thinking about him? At that moment, Ian pressed her to himself. He said that as soon as she weakened her defense, she would lose immediately. The prince asked why she was suddenly interested in the blade. Is it really necessary for her to improve her skills? After all, as long as she is near him, she will not have to hold a weapon in her hands. Leah responded that she didn't want to be the person who always relied on others to protect her, and she didn't want to hide behind anyone anymore. So, Leah pinned the prince to a tree and attacked with a blade. He praised her, and she said that the main thing is not to weaken the defense. A few days later, Leah heard near the academy that Professor Kirchman had been suspended, and Mr. Claude had done his best to do it. Kirchman had always been a thorn in his side, especially since he had touched the young servant of the Ihar house. At that moment, Thorin approached Laius. He asked if he had a sister that no one knew about. Leah pretended to, and Laius got angry at the hints about an illegitimate child, saying that he only had an older brother. Leo scolded Thorin for suggesting an illegitimate child, and Thorin, said that he had simply seen a girl in the Imperial Library who looked very much like him. "You're blocking my way," Claude said, coming up to them. They parted, and he walked silently between them. Laius wished him a good day. Claude walked past Laius without saying a word. And in Leah's head, his phrase was again heard. "I hate you, Camelius Bale." "There. That's much better," Marilyn said, looking at Laius in his wig with his hair color. This time she chose it herself, knowing that Laius would not be able to refuse her. "You are too beautiful, sir. Because of this, sometimes I think that you are actually a girl." "Nonsense, isn't it?" asked Marilyn. Leah opened the box that Marilyn handed her. There was a very beautiful brooch in the shape of a bird. Marilyn said that it would protect her in case of an attack on the heart. But, of course, if luck smiles on her. Laius thanked Marilyn for her concern and said that he could stand up for himself. After all, being handsome does not mean not being a man. Gathered at the table were Prince Wade, Mr. Claude, Mrs. Marilyn, Laius in women's clothing, and Prince Ian sitting next to him. Prince Wade said that they were gathered here to discuss the investigation, and catching the criminal is their main goal. He said that the guards were allowed to shoot on the spot when detaining a criminal, but Claude was against it because it would be too dangerous for their hostage. The prince asked if he meant Camelius. Claude replied that Camelius could not be allowed to come into danger. Leah was pleased with his concern. Then Wade admitted that he was right, and that was why Prince Ian was here with them now. He agreed to help as a friend and protect Camelius on the mission. "Friend? You just called the enemy Prince of Gaor a friend?" Claude asked. But Wade replied that times were changing and one could not be on the brink of war all the time. Claude then asked if His Majesty understood that he might be putting Prince Ian in danger. Vale responded that it was the attackers who should be worried about their lives. Claude still did not understand how His Majesty could allow Gaor to participate in the affairs of the Empire. The prince replied that the bales would arrive in Ether in 2 days, and they need to figure it all out before that happens, because if the Marquis knows about Camillus being involved in this, they'll all be in big trouble. Claude asked why Camillus should risk his life for the prince's reputation. Claude turned and walked towards the door. Marilyn called him, and Leah said he would go with him. Also, I have to refuse your help, Prince Ian. You will attract a lot of attention, and I don't want things to get any more complicated than they already are, Leah said before leaving. Prince Ian promised not to interfere, only if she was in a dangerous situation. Then Leah said that the blade would protect her, not him, and Prince Wade, watching their argument, thought that it seemed that Camillus Bale would not be taken so easily. A moment later, Claude and Leah were already sitting in the car. Claude thought that this tension was not helping at all, but he had to accompany Leah on a mission. Leah decided to break the silence and asked where they were going. He was silent. Then Leah said that she had heard that Eddie Kirchman had been suspended and that it would be difficult for them to navigate lower without a guide. To this, the guy replied that he would be her guide. Leah was very surprised and asked again, since lower is a real labyrinth. Claude replied that he had already memorized the route. Laius would be introduced by a man to the group they were watching, and they would try to kidnap him, not knowing that it was a trap. A few days ago, I saw a girl who looked exactly like you, Claude confessed to her. And Laius replied that it was probably because he had an ordinary appearance. And also, Laius said that he had already been told something similar about his appearance, Lord Thorin, for example. Then Claude said that he was looking for that girl. I need to check something. I think you could be that girl, Camillus Bale, Claude told Leah. Leah realized that he didn't believe it then. Are you crazy? Leah asked timidly. Well, I think I'm almost on the edge of something, Claude replied, moving closer to her lips. As they walked across the bridge, Leah wondered why Claude was holding her by the waist. Wasn't he standing too close? And she asked why they didn't go into the lower itself. Claude replied that it was too risky. They would stay on the outskirts for now. Then Leah asked them to keep their distance, as no one would want to make an enemy of the Ihar house. But the guy said it was all part of the plan. The criminals would think she was his lover, and that would make her even more desirable as bait. Claude asked to trust him and said that he would leave the place at the right time. Leah replied that everyone in the Empire knew that Marilyn Shelby was his fiancée. Then the guy replied that if so, that made her his mistress. Leah was angry that she had to entertain him until the kidnappers showed up. Suddenly, Leah noticed a man walking across the bridge. She knew him. Leah remembered how he came to her mother when she was little. He was a doctor. Claude said that the time had come, and as he left, he said that he would return with something sweet for her, calling her Mrs. Camellia. Leah was surprised to hear her name. The guy whispered in her ear that he was improvising. Wait here. They will be here soon. And remember, your safety is the most important thing, Claude said and left. And Leah sat on the bench and wondered if this politeness was really a common virtue that nobles showed even to those they hated. If not, it's because he really suspects that she's a girl. What exactly do you want to check? Leah thought indignantly. When 2 children, an older girl and a younger boy, approached the girl, she realized that the criminals were using children for their crimes. The children complained that they were hungry and asked her to buy them some bread. Leah thought that they might suspect something if she immediately agreed to go with them, and the girl offered them a coin so that they would go and get the bread themselves. But the girl said that the adults would simply take the money from them, and all they wanted was to just eat some bread. Leah realized that this was how they lured their victims. Then Leah gave them a coin and asked that it remain their secret, and she agreed to go with them to buy them something to eat. She was upset that the criminals were involving children in this business, and the girl noticed that Leah was upset and asked if it was because she had to go so far. But she begged the lady very much, because that shop had the cheapest bread. Leah said that everything was fine, and at her age, she also had to go far in search of cheap bread. When Leah bought bread and buns for the children at the store, the girl said that they were no longer very hungry and that they needed to hurry up and leave. Leah understood everything and asked the girl for a favor, whispering something in her ear. She asked the saleswoman to give the children the buns when they returned. When the girl came out onto the street, this alley looked like a shortcut to lower. Now she understood why they brought her here. Suddenly, a guy called out to her from behind, and pressed a handkerchief to her nose. Leah dropped her purse on the ground in a dark alley. The guy said it was fast, and the other guy said, "Did you think kidnapping a naive noblewoman would be hard?" The doctor said she looked familiar for some reason, but they would know who she was when they got there. And he ordered 2 guys to take her away. "They brought him to the bakery down this alley," the guard told Claude. Claude said that meant they would track their hideout from here, but the boy said it was too dangerous. Claude still didn't listen to him and went to look for Camillus. Ian asked permission to join him, but Claude was against it. He thought it was none of a foreign prince's business. Prince Ian was outraged because they had taken Camillus, and he couldn't just sit and wait. Claude then replied that it was part of the plan, and reminded the prince that these were imperial affairs and had nothing to do with Georg. Ian replied that maybe for Claude it was another government assignment, but for him it was a personal matter. Then Claude asked who Camillus was to him. Prince Ian replied that Camillus was the one who would share the future with me. Claude did not like this. Ian noticed Leah's bag with the children. The children were sitting on the ground and were scared. They had Leah's bag. Prince Ian ruled them with his sword and asked what happened to the owner of the bag. Claude asked him to put the sword away and said that they were just children. Ian wondered if Claude would have acted the same way if he had known that Camillus was a girl. But he replied to Claude that he probably didn't know that innocence and cruelty go hand in hand. Besides, children have a weak sense of guilt, and you, apparently, do not know how to deal with children without resorting to violence, Claude answered him. The children asked for mercy. They said they would let us go if we brought the lady here, the children told them. The saleswoman protected the children and showed them which way their lady went. The girl called out to Mr. Claude and, showing him a white handbag, said that the lady had asked him to give it to a handsome gentleman with blue eyes. Claude opened his bag, and there was a half-eaten loaf of bread. He remembered Leah's words about being able to stand up for himself, and he saw crumbs of bread on the ground. The crumbs led into a dark alley. Claude told Ian that he would not take Laios with him to Georg, adding, "He is not yours to command, he is mine. Did you see how he looked after her? We made the right choice this time. I hope she won't disappoint us like Marilyn Shelby," one of the guys said. "What about the kids? They saw us. So we can't let them live, can we?" the second guy asked. The doctor replied that they had other concerns for now. The guy asked what they would cut off and send first, the hair or the fingers. But the doctor stopped him, saying that she reminded him of someone. Looking into Leah's eyes, the doctor realized that she was not at all scared. "Except for the color of your hair and eyes, you certainly look just like Laura," the doctor said to Leah, looking into her eyes. The boys remembered Laura, of whom he spoke. They said that Laura said that she lost her daughter a couple of years ago. That's why she left lower. Leah was upset that her mother left, but the doctor replied that Laura had returned, and thanks to that He didn't finish, and asked if this was really the same daughter, now all grown up. "What do you gain by blackmailing children and kidnapping women?" Leah asked. The doctor replied that it was not for a noblewoman in silk robes to teach them while their children were starving. Leah was indignant that this was being said by a man who raised weapons against the defenseless. The girl realized that these were haters of the nobility. Don't delude yourself into thinking that you are serving a higher purpose. You are nothing more than criminals. "What next? Imprisonment? Murder?" the girl asked. The doctor hit Leah in the face and said that Laura's daughter would never say such nonsense. And apparently he was wrong and it wasn't her. "Criminals, huh? How insulting," the doctor said, and ordered the boys to start with the hair. And the boy replied that the doc was too kind. He would start with the hand. Now Leah was sure that this was the same doctor who came to her mother. The girl asked why he wanted to harm the children who helped him. The guy asked her why she was so worried about the children who were abandoned by their parents. There was no one to mourn them. They were on the street because their parents couldn't feed them because of the nobles. The girl told him to stop passing off ridiculous statements as facts, and to stop pretending to be heroes when all they could do was hide behind their puppets. The guy grabbed Leah by the hair and said that she should beg for mercy, not argue with him. And the girl replied that he should beg for mercy. Then he got angry and cut off a lock of her hair with his sword. And he said that even at the threshold of death, they cannot get rid of their pride. Although, they begin to beg for mercy, noticing a drop of blood. Do you even imagine how many brave nobles died by my hand? Asked the doctor. Leah said it didn't matter what he did to her or how many people he killed. He said 12, and she would be the 13th. While he was saying that they all deserved to die, Leah slowly cut the rope that bound her hands with a blade. The doctor said that this was because they treated their slaves like animals and killed commoners for no reason. You have no idea what it's like to be treated worse than an insect, the doctor said. But Leah interrupted him. She said that those who shout so much about inequality on the part of the nobility themselves treated the children who helped them worse than insects. And these children are being looked after by my people. We knew that you would want to get rid of them to cover your tracks, Leah told them. The doctor did not understand what she was talking about. I wonder how you plan to shut them up now that they are under the supervision of the city guard. You will face a humiliating future in prison, thanks to the nobles you despise. And just so you know, I'm not the Duke's mistress, Leah admitted, removing her wig. She introduced herself as Camillus Bale, second son of Marquis Gilliard Bale, and the one the family doesn't need. The doctor couldn't believe why the Marquis would abandon his son. Leah replied that it was a long story, but if he pulled the trigger, it would bring soldiers here. Leah said that dreamers like them would hardly want to die such a meaningless death. The doctor replied that when he learned her name, he had a better plan. They will escape using her as a hostage. Leah reminded them that she is an unwanted child, and they will sign their own death warrant. The soldiers will shoot at them all. When Leah showed that her hands were no longer tied, and thanks to the breadcrumbs, Mr. Claude and the city guard would come for her. Then the boy pointed his sword at her earring and said that one such trinket could feed his family for months. Yes, with this no one will have to go hungry, he said. What's the point if they're already here? The other guy asked, pointing a gun at him and Leah. The doctor yelled and he shot them. The doctor looked in their bodies, which were covered in blood. He told the other guy that they had to leave because they had already been found. They couldn't let their plans fall apart. Then the doctor hurt his own hand and went out to the city guard himself. Claude ordered them not to shoot, as they might have a hostage. Claude approached him. He was kneeling and begging for mercy, since he was a doctor. Claude presented a gun to his head and asked where the girl was. The guard told Mr. Claude that they had found a body. Claude pretended that Leas was dead, but Ian said that the doctor could not be trusted since he was one of them. But the doctor told them that the criminals had called him to examine the wounded girl, but she was dead. And so, he tried to escape. Then Claude ran into the building and rushed to Camillus. He found him on the floor, and when he realized that he was alive, he asked if everything was okay, if he was hurt. Leas replied that it was nothing serious, and his advice had been useful. Holding the bloody blade in his hand and pointing at the criminal on the floor, Leas asked if he was alive. Claude asked him not to think about it now and asked if he could stand. And then Prince Ian came up to them and said that he would take Leos home. He picked her up and carried her. As Ian carried Leos away, Claude sat on the floor and thought, why him and not me? Then, he ordered the victims to be rounded up and the doctor to be arrested. He also ordered to find out who owned the ship they were on now. Someone had shot the ship to cover their tracks. Prince Ian was treating the wounds on Leah's face. When she reminded him that she had asked Pippi to do this, the prince said that it was a routine matter for him. Why did you risk your life for this? Ian finally asked her. Leah replied that it was simply because she could help. The guy told her that she was attracting too much attention to herself, thus, unknowingly, forcing everyone to notice her. Leah didn't understand what he was talking about. Then Ian said that he really liked to see her dressed like a lady, but he couldn't let her charm everyone in the area. Leah said indignantly that he was not joking at all, and Ian asked if it looked like he was joking and kissed her tenderly on the cheek. The girl was outraged, and the prince said that this was her punishment for seducing another man. Leah denied such behavior. Then Ian said that she needed to rest, and he would check on her later. As he walked out the door, he asked Pippi to bring Laius a change of clothes and to call him if she noticed any serious injuries. Standing in the hallway, he remembered Claude's words about Leos being his. He knew he was his rival, but he wondered if Claude knew the truth about Leos. At that moment, Claude came up to him. Ian said he didn't expect to see him there. But the guy didn't come alone. He came with some beaten guy. Claude said he was hiding near the estate. And Claude reminded Prince Ian that their hospitality extended only to him, not to his spies. To this, Ian replied to Claude that he understood that he was worried about Camillus, but he was not a spy, but a man introduced by his brother to look after him. Claude replied that his lie was not credible. Ian knew that Claude did not believe him, and this was not surprising. Then the prince called the spy and said that he would be punished. While Pippi was treating Leah's wounds somewhere around her chest, Mr. Claude came into the room. He took Laios's hand and asked him to take off his shirt to see if his ribs were broken. Leah replied that everything was fine and that her maid would help her with it. She wondered why he had come without even saying anything. She thought he suspected something, and then she herself admitted to him that she was not the girl he was looking for. Claude touched her face with his hand and said that whether it was her or not, it didn't matter anymore. Then Leah asked what brought him here to her. Claude answered that he needed a witness because the doctor had deceived the guards and escaped. The girl remembered the doctor and that he knew her mother. Perhaps he could help her find her. Claude said that the most important thing was that Laios was okay. Then Laios asked Claude for a favor. It concerned the children who had given him the bag. They needed to be placed somewhere in the house as servants, since the criminals would not leave them. Claude didn't understand why he needed to do this. Laios said that they had seen even more than he had and would be indispensable witnesses. "Don't you want to catch those who attacked your fiancé?" Laios asked. The guy laughed and said that he and Marilyn were not engaged. Then he kissed Leah's hand and said that it had been like that for him since the moment they met. "You, who appeared before me as Kieran's brother, unlike any other aristocrat, were like an outsider who could not hide his emotions. At first, I was simply surprised by the open discontent in your gaze, but after that, I realized that you only give this uncomfortable look to me, and I felt a pain I couldn't describe. Anger, irritation, anxiety, confusion. By the time I realized that something was wrong with me, the feelings had completely consumed me. I guess it's been that way since I first met you," Claude admitted. Laios asked if he didn't hate him. Claude replied that he had never hated him. And when Mr. Claude left, Leah could not bring herself to collect her thoughts for a long time. A few days later, Laios was sitting in the Bale estate in Ether. Leah really hoped that the escaped doctor did not plan to harm her mother. She has a very kind heart. She would never have thought that he was such a person. And the Duke, they did not see each other after that day. Leah had so many worries in her head. Her older brother, Kieran, came up to her. He had finally arrived. The brother immediately asked Leah if she was okay. But before she could answer, Mrs. Anastasia entered the room. She told Laios that she would talk to him later, and his thoughtless actions would not go unpunished. But that would have to wait until he recovered. Anastasia said that was all for today, and he could go to the mansion. Kieran hugged Leah and said that the most important thing was that she was safe. Kieran offered to take Leah home, but she objected, worrying that he was probably tired from the journey. But her brother said that he could not afford to rest. After all, he knows that in his absence, 2 rather annoying parasites have been bothering her. And now that he's back, no one will bother her. Leah walked to the academy and thought what a good brother she had, like an angel descended from heaven. She really wanted to have dinner with him sometime. Less than a week had passed since her brother Kieran had returned to the capital, and he had immediately become the head of the capital's society, Princess Rosina's betrothed. But the fact that he has the blood of the emperor's favorite, Marquis Gilliard Bale, is one of the few things that makes him attractive to the courtiers. And Leah thought he was attractive in every sense of the word. She was very happy to have such a brother in her life, but she was pestered by his fans. The next time Leah ran away from them, she hid in a little house in the garden. When she sat down on the sofa, it turned out that someone was already lying there. It was Claude. Leah asked him what he was doing there. The guy asked Laios not to shout and said that he was just sleeping in his personal resting place. Laios said that if he had only known that this was his place to rest, he would never have entered here, and he asked to let him go, as he could find another place for himself. Claude was hugging Laios, and Leah thought he smelled so nice of lavender. She buried her face in his chest and inhaled the machine gun deeply, lying on him on the couch. Laios jumped up and walked towards the exit. Then he stopped and asked why Claude didn't ask him about that day. The guy replied that his safety was the only thing he cared about. Leah, leaving the house, did not understand what had just happened. Had he found out who she really was, or had he preferred men? It couldn't be. Suddenly, Leah heard a familiar voice telling her that even her wounds couldn't keep her home. It was Ian, and he said he missed her. "There's a heartless villain keeping an eye on me, but any danger is worth seeing you," he confessed to Leah, as Kieran watched from the window. Kieran sat in a room with two officers. He asked them what they had told him, that Eddie Kirchman had recommended the camellias as bait in their investigation, and they in turn disguised his brother as a girl. But the officer said the operation went well. But that day, a man was seen next to Mr. Camelius, and he had ash blonde hair and was dressed like a nobleman. Kieran asked why they were looking for him. The officer said that 7 people had been shot that night, and the bullets found in the bodies were not from their empire. The officer believed that whether he was a criminal or not, the guilty one must answer for each death. And Kieran replied that the prince was a guest of the emperor, so it was unlikely that he was involved in this. Kieran then asked the officers where Eddie Kirchman was. They told him he had been fired. This was answered by Claude, who entered their room. Sitting down on the sofa, Claude told his friend that his arrival had shaken the capital quite a bit. Many girls had their eyes on Princess Rosina's chosen one, and Her Highness probably isn't too happy about it. Kieran replied that even if it was true, he was loyal to his fiancée, and asked what was really bothering Claude. Claude admitted that he had recently met a girl who looked exactly like Camelius. Kieran joked that no one could compete with his younger brother in beauty. Then Claude confessed that he wanted to find her. Kieran immediately jumped up and said that it was time for him to have dinner with Rosina. "You've always been a bad liar, Kieran," Claude thought, sitting on the sofa. "I had no idea there was such a place in the academy." "It reminds me of Corsair. How did you find it?" Leas asked Ian. The prince replied that he had followed the scent of the water and knew that she would like it. Leah was surprised that the water had a scent. Ian admitted that Corsair was as beautiful as she was. Leas replied that he had heard that there were beautiful places in Gyore too, and asked if the prince missed home. Ian replied that he did not want to go back. However, he had already run out of excuses to stay here, so he would have to return home as soon as Kieran's engagement ceremony was over. "Let me give you a parting gift before you leave." "Anything you wish," Ian said, moving closer to Leah's lips. Leah replied that there was no gift she wanted. Then the prince asked if it was something she thought he couldn't get. "Yes, that's right. It's far beyond your capabilities," Leah replied. "Well, then I'll help you get to lower," the prince suddenly offered her. Ian assured her that he could do it and would cover for her while she searched for what she wanted to find. Leah was surprised and thought that her brother had told him, but the prince admitted that he had guessed everything himself. After all, she leaves more clues than she thinks. Ian stroked Leah's cheek with his hand. "I have not taken my eyes off you since the moment I set foot on this earth." "I told you it was love at first sight, Camelius," the prince confessed. They heard a rustlings in the bushes. Ian saw that it was Claude, and he asked Leah again how he could help her. She said that she would find what she had lost herself. Then Ian said that it might be a long time before they could see each other again. That's why he wanted to give her such a gift. Leah said it was time for her to go home, and he had better get home before dark, too. "I'd better hurry," Prince Ian thought as Leah left. At the capital's City Watch headquarters 10 days later, an officer informed Kieran and Camelius that they had questioned the suspects, and they could not act on their own. Camelius had said that the orders had come from a man they called the Doctor. But now, as Leah had guessed, they realized that he was not behind all this. The officer added that they also found out that the criminals' goal is not revenge. They are asking for ransom for the hostages to finance their activities. Could it be that they are threatening my mother too? "This is more serious than I thought," Leah thought. As the officer said goodbye to them, Kieran noticed how sad she looked. As Leah floated in the water, lying on her back, and thinking that it was for the best that Kieran was so busy these days, she remembered Mistress Anastasia's words about punishment. It looked like the patrols in Lower would be around for a long time, and Leah was wondering when she would have the chance to go looking for her mother again. "I wonder if she knows how dangerous this doctor is." And then Leah saw someone approach the water. "I should have known it was you," the guy said. "Hello, Camelius. Enjoying some water? Is this your first time since Corsair? May I join in?" Claude asked, unbuttoning his shirt. Leah, with horror, covering her chest under her shirt with her hands, asked if he wasn't hunting now. After all, he was in a suit and with a horse. Claude replied that he had simply come across the scent of an animal that was quietly wandering around his hunting grounds. Leah immediately realized that he meant her. Master Claude warned Laius that he was hunting with His Majesty Prince Wade, so it would be better if he didn't run into him like this. So he asked Laius to stay where he was until he lost sight of them. Laius thanked him for his concern. When the guys were already far away, Leah came out of the water. The girl looked at her reflection in the water, and she didn't like that everything around was a complete deception on her part. Prince Wade asked Claude where he had disappeared to. He replied that he had gotten lost. But Wade did not believe that such a thing could happen to him. Then Wade asked Claude about the third attempt on his father's life, why the Grand Duke had said nothing. Claude replied that the attempts had failed and his father was unwavering. Claude said that Ian Sergio could no longer be in the Empire. Prince Wade reminded him that he might be the only hope to end the centuries-old feud between Kine and Gaor. The boy thought about it. Lower, Camillus, Ian Sergio, all pointed to something hidden. It seemed like Ian didn't care at all that Laius was a boy. But could he say that about himself? Wade asked why Claude kept looking at the lake, as if he had lost a treasure there. The guy admitted that he had. The prince immediately realized that Claude had fallen in love with someone, and Wade said that now it was his turn to suffer. Claude admitted that he was horrified by himself and felt incredible disgust. He added, "The more you try to escape from the painful realization, the more it will pull you down until you drown." Mrs. Marilyn and her friends were discussing that the bandits who attacked her had been caught. Unfortunately, their leader was still at large. But it was only a matter of time before they were punished, now that Monsieur Claude had joined the investigation. The ladies envied her that the Duke was showing his concern. The girls noticed Camillus Bale next to Mistress Anastasia, looking very depressed. They told Marilyn that he had played an important role in catching the criminals. Then the boys entered the hall, and the girls' gazes turned to them. Prince Wade greeted Princess Rosina and Lady Marilyn, and Kieran did the same, but not Claude. Marilyn noticed that he was not looking at her as she wanted, but at someone else. Camillus again. Claude did not take his eyes off him. Leah went outside and sat down on a bench. She remembered Mistress Anastasia's words about expecting her to return to Corsor immediately after Kieran's wedding ceremony. Leave the city quietly. Today, watch the nobles and remember how to behave at meetings of aristocrats. And if you want to become one of them, you will have a choice, said the lady. Leah felt sad again. Was it a choice if she had to live like this for the rest of her life? If she chose to be a nobleman, why did Anastasia offer her this? A boy came up to Laius and called him. It was Lord Thorin. At this time, at the banquet, Marilyn Shelby was talking with Mr. Claude about diamonds on neutral territory. Claude didn't want to discuss it with her. His thoughts were occupied with other things. So, soon, he left her again, leaving her with his friends. They discussed how the map of Lower that Eddie Kirchman had provided was wrong. In their conversation, they did not notice that Claude had disappeared from their company. On the street, Thorin chased Laius and shouted that he knew he was the lady in the library. Laius asked if he had fallen in love with her in her guise. Finally, Laius told Thorin to challenge him to a duel if he wanted to have a showdown, because he was tired of his constant nagging. And Leah turned to leave and bumped into Claude. He hugged Laius and asked Thorin what his problem was with Camillus. He replied that they were just talking, and he expected an apology for the insults. How exactly did my brother insult you? Kieran suddenly appeared. Leah decided to leave this showdown to her older brother. And Claude, taking advantage of the fact that Kieran was distracted by Thorin, hugged Laius and asked if he was going to run away, or if he liked being near his mistress. Laius replied that his presence would only complicate things. Claude said that he was growing bolder every day. The brother noticed them and ordered Laius to go inside. Claude, where did you disappear to in the middle of the conversation, looking for Camillus? Kieran asked when he finished dealing with Thorin. Claude replied that he met him here by chance, but Kieran didn't believe it, saying it seemed too suspicious to be a coincidence. Claude replied that overprotection was not good for anyone. Aren't you the one being overprotective? Kieran asked Claude. Claude replied that his brother was as fragile as a sandcastle, and someone needed to look after him. Anastasia sat in her bedroom and remembered how everyone praised Camillus at the banquet. But when someone said that the younger brother would surpass the older one, it made her very angry. The older you get, the more you resemble your mother. What should I do with your illegitimate daughter, Laura? Mrs. Anastasia said to herself. A servant entered her room and informed her that the Marquise's carriage had arrived at the imperial palace, and he returned in the company of His Highness the Grand Duke. Oh, heavens! The mines are filled with diamonds of such excellent quality. No wonder Gayor wants to take the neutral territories, His Majesty said, examining the diamond. He asked if they had found out who owned these lands. Not yet, Your Majesty, answered Maximilian Delihar, the Grand Duke, ruler of Delcasa. However, it must be someone from the royal family. No aristocrat can have such large territories in his possession. Then His Majesty remembered that the son of Marquis Bale had brought a guest from the royal family of Gayor and asked where he was now. Bale replied that he was Prince Ian Sergio, and he could invite him to the wedding ceremony if that was what was needed. They would like to invite him now for a talk, but it was already quite late. Maximilian was then asked if it was true that another attempt had been made on his life on the way here. He replied that he suspected the intervention of Gayor, but he also has many enemies in the empire who want him dead. His Majesty asked him to stay in the palace while it is too dangerous outside. Pippi informed Leah that the Marquis and His Highness, the Grand Duke, arrived at the imperial palace late yesterday evening. And since rumors spread quickly, everyone knew about it. She also knows that Marilyn Shelby has proposed to Mr. Claude. In front of all the guests, she grabbed his sleeve and told him that she was going to visit the North. Leah wondered what that could mean. For example, that Marilyn was waiting for an engagement date. But then why had Claude said they weren't engaged? Pippi praised Mr. Claude's beauty and asked if Leah had never looked at him. Leah replied that she had never thought of him in that way. A servant entered their room, brought Laios an envelope, and said that it was from a very well-dressed gentleman who said that she would immediately understand who the letter was from. He also had round glasses and a strong smell of antiseptic. Leah immediately knew who he was talking about. She opened the envelope. Laura had a daughter long lost, and I know her as the illegitimate son of the Marquis of Gilliard Bale. Is this of sufficient interest to you for a meeting, mistress? Mistress Anastasia and Marquis Gilliard stood in confusion when they heard Prince Ian Sergio's proposal. He repeated, I want to officially announce your daughter as my bride. They pretended not to know what he was talking about. But Prince Ian said that they really thought he would fall for this farce that Leah was a man. The Marquis said it was quite unexpected and asked if he wanted to take Camilla as his wife now. Ian replied that he didn't want to marry her right away, but he wanted assurances. With your permission, I would like her to make her debut next year. Before the wedding, she must regain her true identity, the prince told them. The lady replied that Camillus wanted a quiet and peaceful life. The emperor wanted to obtain a trade agreement with Gayor, so Anastasia suggested that it would be better if he chose one of the princesses. But the prince replied that he only needed Camilla. Gilliard asked what would happen if Leah didn't want it. After all, she had lived here all her life as a boy. Then Ian replied that he would do everything he could to change her mind. Ian said he would take their silence as consent. And Gilliard informed him that His Majesty, the Emperor, wanted to meet him in person. The prince was surprised. Bale said that the emperor was convinced that the neutral territory was in the hands of the Gayor aristocracy. Therefore, the Marquis asked Ian to accept the invitation. My daughter's engagement will be discussed after we meet with His Majesty, Gilliard said. But Kieran jumped to his feet. He told his father that there was no need to ask the prince about the owner of the neutral territories. After all, the true owner was right in front of them, Ian Sergio. Then Kieran called Ian to follow him into the hallway. Ian asked him why this belated anger. After all, he had long known that he was in love with his sister. Kieran replied that Camilla was too young, and that was not why he told him the truth. Ian replied that Kieran did it for his own peace of mind, because he had a hand in creating this illusion of life. Kieran said he was right, and so he would try to do everything to atone for his guilt and give Leah freedom. Bale believed that Leah's marriage in Gayor would be like a gilded cage for her. Everything she enjoyed as a man would be denied her once she put on a dress. Kieran said that Ian would be the one to take her freedom. Then the prince replied that at least she would be alive. Bale did not understand his hints and asked what he was talking about. "You disappoint me, Kieran. You are naive if you believe that your lovely mother will let her live. Don't worry, she will be free as a bird with me," Ian replied. Prince Ian told Kieran that he might think he was smug, but he loved Camellia. Kieran then called him mad, and Ian said yes. But there's someone crazier than him, and he's back with Camellia, and Kieran doesn't even know it. Claude was informed that the attacker had managed to slit his own throat before they could get any information out of him. If the killer chose death rather than reveal the information, then there is definitely no ordinary person behind all this, Claude told his father. Claude couldn't understand how his father could remain so calm, after all. This was already the third attempt on his life. Maximum replied that he had grown up to be a worthy replacement. "If this is how I am to inherit the title, then I refuse, at least for the next 10 years, the son replied. Claude noticed that Dad looked tired. He replied that he had no reason to worry and promised him that everything would be fine. He added that he would stay with him as long as he could. As Claude sat under the tree in the garden, he thought that if it turned out that Gayor was behind the attempted murders, there would be a war. And this prince, who is called a war fanatic, must have a reason why he remains in the empire. Is it possible that he has an ally here? Suddenly, Prince Ian appeared from behind a tree and said that he was curious about who was sitting there. Then, Claude asked why he was there. Ian replied that he wanted to see Camillus, but he was still in class. Then, Claude asked why he was in the empire. Ian replied, in order to gain a lot. Claude asked directly if Gayor was behind the assassination attempts on his father, and if he did not stop, there would be a war. The prince replied that on the contrary, there would be no war, because soon their states, Cayenne and Gayor, will become allies through a marriage union. Claude did not want to believe what he heard and asked who he was talking about, but Ian said it was a secret. "The more you value something, the more carefully you have to hide it," the prince added. And as he left, he asked Claude to tell Camillus that he was there. After Ian left, Claude thought, everyone has known for a long time that the prince likes Camillus. However, marriage, what the hell is he thinking? A few days later, in the Imperial Library, Lady Anastasia approached Laius and informed him that she did not wish to see him at Kieran's engagement ceremony. Leah replied that her brother would be very upset. Then she sat clutching the letter and thought about how security around Lower was still tight, and the celebration of her brother's engagement would be over in a week. She would have to try again later, she thought, reading the letter and looking out the window. Suddenly, Monsieur Claude, the young duke, entered her library. He said that he had noticed Camillus and had come. Claude asked why he was still there. Leos replied that he was not feeling well. Then, Claude offered to take him to the hospital or to the imperial palace, but Leos refused. Then, Claude said that he had no reason to leave either. "Rather than go to a boring ceremony, I would rather stay here with you," Claude told him, sitting next to him on the couch. But Leos objected that he could not miss the ceremony, as Kieran would be very upset. Claude replied that he doubted that he would notice his absence in a room full of guests. Leah thought that Claude was not without responsibility, but sometimes he behaved so childishly. But suddenly, he became serious and confessed that his father had been attacked again, and he thought about what he should do first when he researched the title. Claude decided that he should gather people around him that he could trust. After all, he would manage the estate, and with their help, he would strengthen his position. Leah thought that this was the second time he had mentioned that she should work in his estate. Mr. Claude asked if he would refuse him a second time. Laius replied that, as he had already said, he wanted to do something and would soon leave this place in search of his own life. Then Claude asked him if he had already decided what he wanted to do. Laius replied that he wanted to be a teacher and teach children. "There are children in the estate who need education. You asked me about it yourself. You asked me to shelter these children, but you yourself never got around to visiting them," Claude said with resentment. Leah was surprised by his action. "Mr. Claude, I think you are really a good man," Leah said. Claude wanted to confess something to him, but they heard a familiar voice. It was Marilyn Shelby, who ordered to find Mr. Claude, who entered the library. Claude hugged Laius, pressing him against the bookshelf. He said he only needed to stay like that for a minute, and he wouldn't be found out. And Lady Shelby would think he was seeing someone and would finally give in. When the servant found them and called the young duke, Claude told him to go away because he was busy. Marilyn was outraged by such behavior of her fiancé. Leos told Claude that he could have just let her see them together. He shouldn't have hurt her like that. Claude didn't understand why Leos was so upset. Then Leos said that Marilyn must be in a lot of pain because she was in love with him. To this, Claude asked, if Marilyn was in love with him, then who was he in love with? Leah decided to answer that she didn't know, and she wondered if the young Duke liked men, or if he had realized that she was actually a girl. And she decided to tell him again. Mr. Claude, I am a man, said Leah. That's right. If you are a man, you are a man. I know that very well, so there is no need to explain anything, replied Claude. Claude invited Leos to go with him to a place where they could secretly watch the engagement. When they got there, Leos was delighted. He didn't even know such a place existed in the palace. This was the room on the top floor where Claude, Kieran, and Rosina played as children. It seemed then that no living soul knew about this place anymore. Then, Leos asked if it was okay for him to be here now. Claude replied that he was always welcome and said that it was time for him to go to the ceremony now so as not to upset his brother. As Leah watched the ceremony from the window, Claude approached Kieran and Rosina and told his friend that he had a gift and asked him to look up. There, he saw Leos waving at him and congratulating him on his engagement. The brother and sister were happy that they were able to share this important day together thanks to their friend. In the evening, when the fireworks went off, Leah watched them from her room. And Marilyn was looking for Claude on the street and recalling that unpleasant moment when her fiancé hugged another woman in the library. She thought that all men were like that, but not him. At some point, the girl raised her head and saw Camillus in the window. His light hair did not give her peace, the same as in the library. Leos thanked Claude for the food, praising the cook at the imperial palace. Claude got up from the table and said he would be back soon. He wanted to bring something to drink. When Claude left, Leah noticed a large chest of toys in the corner. She thought it was cute that Mr. Claude was still playing with them. She thought he was a charming child. The door creaked, and she thought it was Monsieur Claude returning. I knew it was you, Marilyn said to Shelby as she entered the room. What are you doing here? She asked. At this time, Claude was walking along the corridor of the castle with a bottle of wine. Prince Ian called out to him, asking where Leos was. Claude replied that he did not expect to see him here. The prince said that the purpose of his stay here was the engagement, but he did not even have time to see Kieran properly, since their emperor did not let him go for a minute. Ian repeated his question where Camillus was. Claude replied that he could look for him himself if he wanted, but suddenly they heard the voices of Leos and Marilyn Shelby and hurried upstairs. Leos asked Marilyn what had come over her. She replied that earlier, in the imperial library with Claude, it was him, but Leos insisted that he had been in this room the whole time. The girl said that everything was strange from the very beginning. As soon as he appeared in the palace, Claude changed. Leos said that he did not understand what she was talking about. Then, Marilyn started unbuttoning his shirt and asking him to prove to her that he was a guy and that she was wrong. Leos pushed her onto the bed to calm her down. Leos said he didn't know what had caused her misunderstanding, but her fears would never come true. When Leos let go, she slapped him in the face. Marilyn said that no matter who he was, as long as he was Camillus Bale, he had to act like a man. And since he was a boy, he shouldn't encroach on what belonged to women. When Claude entered the room and asked what was going on, Marilyn admitted that she wanted to make sure that Camillus was really a man and tried to undress him, and Mr. Camillus misinterpreted her intentions and threw her onto the bed. And she was so shocked by this that she slapped him across the face. Claude said that her blow had left its mark, and he had no intention of leaving things as they were. There would be a very high price to pay for hurting someone who belonged to him. Prince Ian intervened and asked what nonsense this was, that the Duke had really fallen for this cheap show, and they have severe punishments for slander in Gaor. You can lose your tonguing and hands, and then arrest. When Claude and Leos were alone in the room, Leos apologized for what had happened, but he did not want to do anything shameful to Lady Shelby. You're the one that Marilyn hit, and you didn't do anything to apologize for. In fact, I want to apologize for what I'm about to do right now, Claude said. Claude said that whether he was a man or a woman didn't matter anymore. The guy stroked Leah's face with his hand and kissed her on the lips, hugging her on the bed. "Mr. Claude, do you like men?" asked Leos, and tears appeared on his cheeks. "Camillus, don't cry, Claude didn't have time to finish speaking before someone entered their room. "The Grand Duke is in a critical condition," Monsieur Claude was informed. His father was sitting on his bed, coughing up blood. His Majesty was informed that it was poison, and that his cup had been laced with it. When Claude entered the room, his father called him to him. "From this moment on, young Duke Claude del Ihar, you are now the Grand Duke Claude del Ihar," Claude's father said, lying in his bed. Leah watched as Maximilian del Ihar died, and Prince Ian turned to her that he needed to return to Gayor right now and asked if she would go with him. And I didn't understand what he was talking about. Then Ian said he didn't know his brother was stupid enough to put poison in it. Maybe someone else did. But from now on, the situation will definitely get complicated, so he offers to let her go with him. "No, she's not going anywhere, Ian," Kieran told the prince. However, he had to get to a safe place quickly, because what he had done tonight would lead to war. Ian kissed Leah's hand and said that he would come back for her. Claude informed the emperor that this was the work of the Marquis of Shelby. His Majesty did not understand, because the Marquis was loyal to the imperial family. And what benefit could he derive from collusion with Gayor? When the emperor asked if he had any intention of marrying the Marquis's daughter, Claude replied that the Marquis of Shelby was the only person who delivered tea to the imperial palace, and he is extremely meticulous in checking the goods. The tea leaves from which the tea was brewed were also delivered by him. Perhaps the target was the imperial family, not his father. In addition, Prince Ian had disappeared. His escort was apprehended, but committed suicide by biting off his tongue. The emperor was shocked that Gayor had managed to reach the very heart of the empire. Claude then informed his Majesty that he was going to take advantage of the situation and return the neutral territories to the control of the empire. Therefore, Lord Claude, now Grand Duke of Del Casa, asks permission from His Majesty, the Emperor, to declare war on Gayor. At this time, in the corridor of the palace, Kieran called Leah and said that it was not safe here now, and she should return to that secret room. Leah asked her brother if it was true that Ian was behind all of this. Kieran replied that they didn't know yet, but it certainly wasn't him personally. "And Duke Claude will have a hard time getting through tonight." "Camelia, do you share the young Duke's feelings?" Leah's brother asked. He remembered 2 years ago when Claude stood outside and looked at the snow. He said that the snow brought back memories and asked what it tasted like. Suddenly, Mrs. Anastasia came up to them and told Leos that she was very disappointed. After all, she told him not to come here, and he dared to ignore her words. Then Kieran stood up for his brother, saying that it was he who asked him to come to the celebration. Anastasia told Kieran to return to Princess Rosina, as it was between her and Camillus. Kieran countered that now was not the time for quarrels, and his mother told him not to be so protective of a man who wasn't even his brother. Kieran asked Leah to go to his room and wait for him there. His mother was offended that Kieran had allowed his mind to be clouded by a senseless attachment, and said that he did not care at all about his poor mother. And Kieran asked, "Tell me, mother, on that day when I was abandoned on the shore of the cold lake, the one responsible for this, was it really Leah's mother, Mrs. Anastasia? What does he mean?" And the son replied that mother knew best what he was talking about, and they went their separate ways down the corridor. Leah sat on the bed in the room and thought only about whether Mr. Claude was okay. To receive such news at such a moment. Someone entered her room, and she thought it was her brother, but it was Monsieur Claude. He said he was looking for Leos, but he objected that the Duke's well-being was more important now. But Claude hugged Leos and said that he would rest a little, standing like that with him, in his arms. Leah hugged him and said that everything would be fine. The venerable Grand Duke of the North had died. The ruler of Del Casa had changed, and people believed that he would take up the sword to destroy his enemies. The shadow of war hung over the empire. Standing by the window, Leah thought, "If what my brother said is true, then the war will start very soon. Does that mean we won't be able to see each other anymore?" Watching from the window, she saw a man in glasses whom she recognized. It was the imperial tailor. He knew her secret. But what brought him here? Leos ran out to meet him. Mr. Frank greeted him and said that they had not seen each other since he had sewn him a uniform for the academy. But Frank noticed that Leos didn't look very well. and he said that the life of an aristocrat is not as easy as it might seem at first glance. Leah thought that he was the only person in the imperial palace who knew her true identity, and she should thank him for keeping her secret. She thanked the tailor, and he said he had something to give her and handed her an envelope. She realized that this was the man who had written to her. Frank said that he had not received an answer to his last letter, and so he came in person. In the envelope, Leah will find a map, and it will lead to the person she is looking for. But he warned her that it was a very dangerous place and not for those who were ill-prepared. So he asked her to open the envelope when she was ready. Rumor has it that Marquis Bale is also looking for her. I kept your secret last time, so this time it's time for you to keep mine. I'll trust you, my lady, the man said as he left. I was surprised by your sudden visit. Is something wrong? Leos's father asked. Leah said he had heard that he was leaving to join the war effort. Gilliard replied that he intended to join Grand Duke Claude. And lately, he had hardly slept, because he was saddened by the death of his close friend. Then Leah said, Father, I think it's time to stop all this. Father didn't understand, and she explained what it meant to stop living like Camillus Bale. Her father asked if she had found her mother Laura, and Leah asked if he had been looking for her too. Gilliard replied that Laura had been good at hide-and-seek since she was a child. Since childhood? Wasn't Mom a maid in the Bale household? Father replied that he was too tired, so Leah should go back to his place. I still can't believe my mom was responsible for what happened to my brother, Leah said. Gilliard said he would think about it. Walking down the corridor, Leah couldn't understand why she had never heard that her mother and father had known each other since childhood. A servant followed her and called her. He asked if she planned to accept Prince Gayor's marriage proposal. Leah asked him what he meant. He told her that Ian Sergio had formally asked for her hand. Leah replied that it was the first time she had heard about it, and she remembered Ian's parting words about him coming back for her and for her to wait for him. The servant said he was glad she wasn't thrilled with the proposal, because the Marquis was worried that Leus would agree and go to Gayor. And the members of the royal family of Gayor are persistent and ruthless, and His Highness Ian has the same blood in his veins, the servant continued. I am well aware that the prince is Lord Kieran's benefactor, and as a butler, I have no right to speak carelessly about my master's friends. However, these are people with a bloodthirsty nature, who certainly cannot be trusted blindly. The butler asked Leus not to go to Gayor, even for the sake of the prospect of a short truce. Walking down the hall to her room, Leah thought about Ian. Was he serious all this time? And if a war starts, they will never see each other again. When Leah entered her room, she saw a man there. As always, you are late, Claude told her. Hello, Camillus, long time no see, he said, smiling. Leos asked in surprise what had brought him here, and wasn't he supposed to go north? Claude replied that he had something to say before he left. Camillus, I am here to apologize for what happened in that room. A frivolous act committed in a fit of fleeting curiosity. I did something I shouldn't have done. Leah didn't want to believe that he was telling her this. But Claude asked her to forget about it, which was very impolite and indecent. Leah couldn't forget about it, because for her it was like a dream come true. At that moment, she felt that she was in the arms of someone who accepted her as she was. Leah started to cry at this injustice. Claude noticed that Leos was not feeling well and asked where his maid was. After all, he had a fever. But Leos replied that he had enough worries and asked Mr. Claude to leave his room. Leah was sad at the window and thought how stupid she had been. Claude met the maid Pippi on the street near the house and ordered her to quickly go to her master, who seemed to have a fever. As he sat in his car, he thought about what he wanted to tell Leos, that he only liked him and not men. Why then did he look like he was ready to cry at any moment? The guy asked the driver how much time they had left. He replied that they had about a couple of hours. Then, Claude decided to stay there for a while. When Pippi left Leah's room, Monsieur Claude was standing in the hallway. He asked her how Camillus was feeling. The maid replied that he had taken his medicine and fallen asleep. Mr. Claude said that he would visit him briefly before leaving and entered the room. Pippi thought that Mr. Claude really cared about his mistress. Claude sat down next to him on the bed and thought that they would not see each other for many years. He wondered if Leos would miss him even a little. Tikai, Leah said, Pippi, it's so hot, and uncovered herself, throwing off the blanket. Claude thought with a smile, Leos, as always, you're hard to please. He glanced at Leas and saw a chest under an unbuttoned shirt. What does this all mean? Kieran, so he was fooling me from the very beginning, Mr. Claude realized. Prince Wade and Grand Duke Claude were sitting on their horses in front of Prince Ian's camp. Wade noticed that Claude was not wearing the clematis brooch today. The Claude he knew would never have traded the precious relic for the future Duchess. Or perhaps it was already on the bosom of the future bride. Wade wondered if it was Marilyn Shelby and he had finally accepted her as his betrothed. But he wouldn't be surprised. People were sentimental before a war. Or is this the nightmare you said you fell in love with? Asked the prince. Claude replied that it was the girl he had left the brooch to as a reminder that her heart belonged to him. And that's why defeat is unacceptable to him. Too much is at stake. Wade said that these were good words and let them bring them an easy victory. The prince decided it was time to begin. "Forward, sons of Cayenne! To the attack!" shouted Prince Wade, and the army galloped toward the enemy camp. "I will return to you alive, and when that happens, I will return your name, your life, and you will be mine, Camelia," said Claude. Leah asked Pippi if Monsieur Claude had been in the room. The maid replied that he had visited her and that it seemed that he was not indifferent to her. Pippi realized that Leah was worried that he might have seen something, and reassured her that he left the room looking sullen as usual. And besides, he would interrogate all the servants if he saw something unusual. Leah thought that Pippi was right. Suddenly, Pippi noticed the brooch. "This is the clematis brooch belonging to the house of Ihar, my lady. Do you think he left it to you?" Pippi asked excitedly. Leah picked up the brooch, but said she doubted he had left it there on purpose. She thought he had dropped it in his haste and decided to keep an eye on it until he returned. The girl thought that as soon as she recovered, she would continue searching for her mother. I wonder if she would be able to give the brooch to Mr. Claude. After all, she might have to leave the estate if she found her. Or maybe she should wait for him to return first. What am I thinking? It's too late to change anything. I've already decided to leave Camelia Spale behind. I have to find my mother. She's waiting for me somewhere out there. I'm sure of it. Leah firmly decided.